Deep, 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 deep. Hey, just got a notification to myself about my own video. Hey, people. I think this is live. Worked last time. I'm just waiting for it to show up on YouTube to make sure it's actually live. Oh, okay, it is. All right. All right. Hey, this is working. Okay, good. Hey, everybody. Hey, folks. How are you? And hello to people watching later. I'm actually streaming this to multiple platforms. So it's on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, as far as I'm aware. So at least that's what it tells me it's doing. I don't know if I can trust it. At some point, I'm going to figure out Periscope. I have this weird problem. I have a weird problem, folks. Also, I can't figure out Periscope because I've got it logged into my incorrect Twitter account. And so it's pointing to my DM Combo account instead of the Dream Prison Press account. And because Twitter is apparently run by robots from space, I can't really get the attention of anybody to fix the problem. So hopefully that will be resolved and I can have videos actually showing up on Twitter. And I should note that I am drinking the world's best coffee. This is unbelievable coffee that I discovered yesterday. It is, prepare yourself, David Lynch brand coffee. This is coffee coffee by David Lynch. So it's weird and tasty. Just like a David Lynch movie. Anybody like David Lynch? I mean, you really can't beat Twin Peaks. Anyway, so I'm without realizing it, I have one of the spreads from Dreamside on screen that I've been working on, and this one's actually pretty far along. So I'm gonna start simple because one of the challenges that I've noticed about live streams that I have is I never want to give too much away, but at the same time, I also never want to put myself in a situation where I can't really focus well on the art itself that I'm trying to do because I'm aware that people are watching me, which is something that I can generally get away from. But I thought I would just kind of start with something that I can't really mess up on the live stream. It's not going to be terribly exciting to watch, but as I go and loosen up a little bit, I'll I'll show you some cooler stuff. But anyway, yeah, this is a spread from Chapter 2 of Dreamside. This is from my upcoming book, Dreamside. The first book of 6 is going to be coming to Kickstarter. I think I'm pretty much locking in on October 15th. That's probably, wait, hang on. October 15th. Yes, October 15th. And that will run until mid-November. So the same dates actually as the ukulele Kickstarter. I think that worked out pretty well. Why not repeat success? So it's a little more challenging with Dreamside because it's really I don't have the benefit of an intellectual property, which is always sounds so pretentious when I say that, but that's what it is. So I don't have the benefit of having a recognized property like that I can interest the fans into. So with Dreamside, I'm starting from scratch, so it's going to be all the more important that I'm able to get support from backers who like what they got with Yuka and want to support what I'm doing next. Dreamside is going to be the coolest thing. It's a killer story. I actually wrote it so many years ago. And I'll talk just a little bit about what it's about because people who have discovered my channel recently might not know the history of Dream Prism and where that actually comes from. But the Dream Prism itself, the company name actually originates from Dreamside. And it references, although this is not a very good drawing to represent it, but it represents this little necklace charm that Sarah wears. Um, and has a very big significance in the story. It's sort of like the way it's described, at least in the first book, is kind of like a magic compass of sorts in Dreamside, which is this fantasy world that Sarah will travel to. Now, Dreamside, I wrote the original version of it way back in 2004. I think I actually started it maybe in 2003, right after I finished college. And I wrote a story based on just ideas that interested me, but also I had volunteered at a children's hospital back in college, and I was an artist. I would go and draw. I would go and draw for kids in a playroom just like this, which is one of the reasons that I picked this spread to kind of start with. To show you is that the playroom. This was at the Pittsburgh Children's Hospital, or Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, I think is the official name. And they had a playroom that pretty much looked a lot like this. Obviously, you're not seeing the whole thing here, but relatively simple experience in terms of a playroom. Nothing too fancy. Kind of had books and tables where you could draw. And the idea was to give kids a place that they could go and hang out and kind of just get away from their patient rooms. And the kids were in there for different amounts of time. But I remember the initial spark of Dreamside came when I was thinking about what it would be like if you lived in the hospital for a long period of time, because there were long-term patients who would I should probably let people know that this is live, don't you think? Yeah, I probably should do that. Let me see. We might get one more viewer. All right, let's see. I'm gonna just tweet about this really quickly so now you can listen to me type. All right, live stream link. That's easy. Make sure I send the right link. Otherwise, we'll have some surprise guests. All right, I think that'll do it. Anyway, where was I? I believe I was talking about sushi. No, I was talking about my experience volunteering at Children's Hospital. Yeah, so there was one girl who I saw. Now I would go once a week, and I think my day was on Wednesday. I might have gone twice a week, but pretty sure it was once a week, and I would go for about 3 hours. And there was one girl who I could swear I saw every day that I was there. So when I saw her the second week, I thought, oh, this poor girl is in here for something kind of serious because she had been there a week prior. And I think I saw her on and off for the duration of maybe that 6-month period. And I thought, wow, some kids spend a lot of time in the hospital. And so it was kind of an interesting idea to think of the hospital almost as kind of like a weird sort of living space for people who are in a very challenging medical condition that they kind of need constant treatment for. So I did some research, and that led me to learn more about what sort of conditions could potentially result in that kind of hospital stay. And eventually it led to a creative concept that popped up that was kind of like, I like to think of it as like, it's like Peter Pan meets Alice in Wonderland, where I had this fantastical character that would visit this child in the hospital who had been in there long term and whisk her away to this fantasy world. And so I would say the closest existing story to Dreamside would be the Never-Ending Story. I describe it as being like the Never-Ending Story with a medical theme. So that's kind of where it's at. So anyway, this is in chapter 2, which is the first chapter where you see Sarah in the hospital. So a little bit of a spoiler there, I probably should have said, but chapter 1 actually is in a dream sequence, and then Sarah wakes and finds herself in the hospital. So she's reminded after this really whimsical, wonderful dream that she's in a hospital. And that's kind of this disquieting, unnerving feeling because she's quite a dreamer. So she has a lot of these intense dreams. And when she wakes in the hospital, she kind of has to bring herself back down to reality. And that leads to a scene that also works for my story needs, which is it allows me to show off the hospital a little bit and give some exposition to Sarah's day-to-day life, so you can learn more about what it's like where she stays. So I'm not very clear in the story for intentional reasons, just how long Sarah has been in the hospital and how long she will continue to be in the hospital. That's not really relevant to the story. And I also want to create a sense of mystery, which is the more that you can have mystery in a story, generally the better off you are. So what I'm going to do here today, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about the story as I go, is I'm right now I'm focused on coloring the line, which, as I said, is not terribly exciting, but it's part of what gives Dreamside its kind of lush rendered look. The black outline that I use when I'm drawing is a little too harsh when I use this kind of colored pencil rendered style. So I color the lines, and it sort of integrates the lines into the painting itself, and it looks a little bit more natural. So it's a time consuming process, but I think it's really worth it. So the way that I do it, I'm using Procreate, as I said here before. These are my layers. Actually, let me show you kind of what this looks like in terms of how I set this up, because I had to be relatively economical with my layers because the iPad, which I'm using to draw, is not the strongest tool for this. Okay. And you really have to figure out how to be intelligent with your layers. So what I'll do is I'm just going to isolate the layers. Actually, I can hold in. This is Procreate, by the way. I can hold my finger on the check box for a particular layer, and it will isolate that layer, so you can just see what's in that particular layer. So here's line art. So this is really this is a line, and I don't work with rough layers. I start rough, and then I evolve that particular layer and eliminate the rough lines as I go, as I refine them. So an example here you can sort of see some of the sketch lines that were still in here. And I'll just bring up my pencil here so you can kind of see what the pencil looks like. So there's these kind of sketchy lines that are in here that stay in here. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it retains a very nice organic look. I mentioned this in the last live stream, but it's really key to making sure that you don't have too harsh of a separation between the line and the color. Okay, so once I have the line and I'm happy with it, I will usually at that point begin putting in flat colors. And in this case, as in just about every case, I want to keep things layered intelligently so that I can make edits if need be, which is really important in a professional work environment. You need to be able to make changes. So I just turned on the base colors. This is the base colors, not flats. I don't really work with flats. I treat it more like a traditional painting. I do use flats to a degree. So if you're familiar with the comic logic of doing flats, like Sarah's color here on the shirt is a flat color. So if I turn off the line, you can see it's just a consistent blue. Okay, and the same with the strap and her hair also, although it has a little part I missed there. So when you have blocks of color like that are singular, don't have they don't have any variation in tone, I can make selections very easily. Using Procreate's automatic selection tool here, I can click on this little button up here and choose automatic, and I make this the layer that it's pulling from, so it knows to work with this layer. And then what I can do is I can just click on that color and drag it, and what it's going to do is it's going to this inverted color here that's kind of the opposite of what her shirt is showing me what's actually selected. Okay, so then when I've got the selection that I want, you can see how it isolates it. So I've got the border outside, the skin, the darker blue border, and the background, and even her arms here are not selected. So right now, if I wanted to, I could relatively easily change the color of her shirt. Isn't that cool? So these sort of digital tools are great for being able to make the kinds of modifications that you may have wanted to make in the past, but you really couldn't do because of the limitations of traditional media. Also, as I go ahead and leave comments and let me know if you have any questions, and I will get to them as I can. And I can actually put your comments on the screen. Let's try this out. Let's see. Joshua Taylor says, I had a family member at Pittsburgh Children's Hospital a little while back. They were really good. Sorry to hear that. I hope they are doing well. But yeah, Pittsburgh is a really good hospital. They were, as far as I remember, at least back in college, they were one of the top rated hospitals in the country. I think they might have been in the top 10. So they really had a great system there. And just going there, it was very cool. It was a really nice setup, and I really admire as an artist, I guess, um, that a place that has such kind of upsetting characteristics as a hospital will try and be as comforting as can be for the patients, because it really is a nerve-wracking experience. It's nerve-wracking as an adult to go to the hospital, so that if you are a young kid who has to go into a children's hospital, the more of um, I guess the less unpleasant of an experience that can be made, the better. So I admire them for their efforts to try and make it a we'll say more aesthetically pleasing environment, and just a place that was relatively comfortable for kids to go, and they did a good job with that. So kudos to Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. Anyway, so as far as the colors are concerned, I keep this back hallway separated, not just because I want to necessarily make edits, but also because I want to make sure that I can make selections easily. So I'm going to turn this off and turn on the flats for the area that's in front of it. So you can see this is just the this is the inversion here. So there's the background, and here is the foreground layer, right? And the reason that I do this is so I can make a selection very easily of these colors. I can use this selection also to help me with other elements that I need to do, like shadows. So for example, I already have a shadow layer, but just to demonstrate, if I were to paint shadows in here, I'm going to pick a good shadow color and then switch this to a multiply layer, switch it actually to a multiply layer. Using the pencil. So if I come in here and I just start painting in shadow, right, I can go over the line, right? And that's fine, but every time that I do that, I have to come in then and erase what is outside the line, and I have to kind of do this sort of carefully. But an alternate way of doing this is, let's say I went over the line like that, I can make a selection based on this area, invert it, and then I can clear the shadow so that it doesn't go beyond that line. You see, so that makes it very easy for me to work. The same way, I can also make a selection based on that, leave it selected, and then as I'm drawing, it just won't be able to go outside that line at all. See, it just locks it in place, so you can't really mess that up. So these sort of tools are very helpful if you're doing things that are a little bit more, we'll say, rigid, and can be really helpful for that. And so that's pretty much the base color and shadow in terms of how that's made. Here are my shadow layers. I have a few of them. Well, I didn't really cover shadow. Let me show you how that's done. Okay, so we brought back just the base colors, right? So then I have two actual shadow layers that are in the background. So here's the first, and here's the second. So, oh wait, no. This is the ground. This is the ground for the foreground. There's only one shadow layer for the background, but for the foreground, I have two shadow layers. So this is one, and that's another one. Okay, so it's a very subtle thing that's happening here, and I didn't finish this, but this shadow layer is a bit more of something that I would call like ambient occlusion, if you guys know what that is. It's a way of creating sort of an extra darkening around the corners of things, and where spaces will kind of gather together. So it's a subtle addition that adds a lot of realism to the rendering quality, so that you don't end up with shading that's a little bit too cartoony. And actually, I'm going to pick that shadow layer. I'll ignore what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to go ahead and do this really quickly because I need to pick this color. All right. So I have the same color that I was using before. So like if I go in here around the edges of things with the pencil, I can add, like, there would be a little bit of shadow in here. You see what I'm saying? Around the edges and the way that it intersects with the ceiling, it would create a little bit of a shadow. And while you don't have to add it, it does add a little bit of extra realism, and that kind of addition adds up in time. The more you do it, the viewer may not look at it and know that you added this effect, but it pays off because the general impression is good. It creates an overall better look. So as long as people look at it and say that the art looks beautiful, then I've done my job. And if they don't, I didn't. Or they just don't like my art. That's also possible. But what's wrong with them? Something I... Oh, right, because I don't have all these layers turned on. So there are other little additions too that I do and keep on separate layers for various reasons. So like you can see, I've got this sort of extra color, like you can see in this girl's shirt, where I just add a bunch of extra detail in terms of the color itself, or I add maybe some tonal variation in the face and in the hair. Looks a little weird just over the flat color, but when you add the shadow on top of it, it makes a lot more sense. So it just gives a little bit of, like, see, that's without it, and then with it, you get a lot more of the detail in the face. But I want to keep that on a separate layer because it makes, if I have to go back and select the character's face, I've got that flat tone that I can select, like I showed you earlier with the character's shirt. Apparently, I changed the color of the ceiling to blue. I don't know what I like better. Doesn't have to be either, but what's better, the blue or the brown? Of course, the brown is really just shadow over white. So it's the same as not having any color on the ceiling. I think I was thinking that it's not just about making it attractive, it's about making it believable. And you want to think about how these places would actually be designed. There's a lot of thought that goes into this stuff. There's a reason, for example, when I drew the door, I thought about things like the handle shape, and I thought about things like what would be next to a door. And I realized, well, not only in terms of what I remember and in terms of what I can see in reference imagery, but there would be like tissues and like a cleaning solution, and that would be easily accessible. They might have multiple places where you can get cleaning solution and tissues, but right next to the door might be a common place. So if people need to use disinfectants or anything like that, they can get it as they enter and exit. But then I also, originally, I had this light switch down where the disinfectant is, and I drew the disinfectant above the light switch, and I realized that kids would not be able to reach it. So I ended up switching those back. And that's the kind of thing that there goes, 15 to 20 minutes of my day just swapping the light switch with the disinfectant because it's just not believable the other way around. So that kind of, I'll say extreme attention to detail and realism seems superfluous, but it is really part of the kind of the things that your brain absorbs in almost a subconscious way while you're looking at these. If something you don't necessarily notice when something's right, but you notice when it's wrong, when something just shouldn't be. And it kind of bothers you a little bit when you look at it. So I want to make sure I avoid situations that stand out because they're bad or because they feel wrong, as opposed to, just putting things in that kind of add that extra detail and interest. Of course, it's great if you can do things that people do notice and they like. But, when it comes to attention for these pieces, it's all a balance. A person's attention can only be so full. Let's just say that anybody has 100% of their attention that they can give, and that 100%, if you, for example, if you draw something in an illustration that takes a lot of attention, say 40% of your attention, right? Well, that only leaves 60%. So if you draw too many things that want to compete for attention, then you can end up really making it exhausting for the viewer because they don't really know where to look. It's a little bit too much it's too much information, really. And so if you look at the way that I've broken this down, I mean, this is all kind of where layout comes into play and why layout is so incredibly important. there's a reason that everything's positioned the way that it is in this piece. And also bear in mind that there will be text on this as well. So I'm accommodating the text, which is not in here yet. But you'll notice that Sarah's position where she is, that is kind of in sort of the page, like the third of the page, because that's sort of an aesthetically pleasing position to put a character, kind of right in that third breakdown. And you'll notice that she's juxtaposed by another character over here that is in the background, that's in another third. But there's a reason this character is facing in this direction. There's a reason that he looks like he's distracted. He's looking at documents. You would assume that this man is probably a doctor. And he's kind of making his way down the hallway here, not paying attention to what's going on in the playroom. And there's a reason that Sarah is not in the playroom and she's outside the playroom looking in. That's a very particular, probably the most important aspect of this entire scene is that Sarah does not really enjoy going into the playroom. And that's for her, it is just not really entertaining for her. Because she's been there a long time and it doesn't really give her a lot of joy. And it's the place where her doctor will tell her when she's stuck in the hospital for a while, waiting for tests or, waiting for her dad to come back and meet her. It's the kind of thing where she'll be told just to go and hang out in the playroom, which is kind of a dismissive thing that the doctors and nurses have to do because, of course, they're very busy and dealing with a lot of patients. So yeah, it's an interesting setup, and I can communicate that story aspect through the visuals without having to put it in the text. So the text is going to have its own story description that's very literal, and then I'm going to have, it'll describe what is happening and what Sarah is feeling and experiencing. But the visuals should communicate something that the text really cannot. And even though it's a very small drawing of her, I want to make sure that she kind of looks a little bored and just kind of unenthused. And maybe even just kind of a little disappointed too, because she wishes that there was something more interesting going on in here. And there's a little tongue-in-cheek self-mockery too, because when I volunteered at the Children's Hospital, I wore a red polo shirt like this because they would give you these red polo shirts that had the Children's Hospital logo. And this was something I was doing all the time, was drawing. I would sit at the table and then kids would come in and I would be charged with drawing with the kids, and no kid really was ever happy in the hospital. So it was kind of hard to, give them a good time when they're sitting there, because they're not really feeling great. Some of them were just plain sick and they don't feel up to drawing. And so that you have to kind of figure out ways to entertain them. So I kind of feel for this implied volunteer here, both of them really, because it's difficult to put yourself in a situation where you can actually cheer these kids up who are really not all that thrilled to be there. Yeah. So let me make sure we're still working here. Yeah, I haven't checked. Let me check and see what this looks like on Facebook. Curious about that, because I haven't gone live on Facebook. Oh, yeah, there it is. Neat. We're live on Facebook. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm using this service called StreamYard, which is very, very cool, because I can have a single stream that not only streams live on multiple platforms, but it also exports the stream. And I think it exports it kind of as a permanent video on those platforms as well, so that they will be retained on them, which is great. Very cool, very cool. And I believe I can see comments from people from different platforms, including, hey, there's Allison, my friend Allison. Hi, Allison. Good to see you. Good to see. What is that? Oh, it's a wave. Hello. Allison is a friend of mine. And Allison works in the medical field, actually. I probably shouldn't tell everyone everything about you, but Allison works in the medical field and actually was somebody who gave me some advice and help when I was in the initial stages of working on Dreamside. So now that it's becoming a real thing, she can see the byproduct of her efforts. so, so thanks for coming by, Allison. It's neat to see you. Anyway, where was I here? I'm gonna just show you a couple more things with these layers here. So one thing, oh, this is why I had a blue ceiling, is because I added these clouds. So this is the kind of thing where the yes, you can make anything in a book, right? I mean, I could draw this to be this amazing, magical, wonderful hospital, but the thing is, hospitals, if you want to make a sense of realism and also a juxtaposition with Dreamside, which really is this whimsical fantasy world where anything does happen, I want to make sure that the hospital feels very down to earth. And it's an attractive hospital. It's pretty. You can tell it has a lot of resources that went into it. At the same time, hospitals have a finite amount of resources, and so they can do what they can do. And of course, the real world is unfortunately bound by the laws of physics. So there are certain things that you can't really do. You got regulations. You have architectural restrictions. So maybe somebody, when they designed this playroom, said, "Hey, wouldn't it be amazing if it felt like when you go in the playroom, it feels like you're in a forest or something like that. And you can look up and see the sky above you." And then this is usually what would end up happening, something that looks like this. So I'll add my little flowers here. So it would be something like this. And the walls would be painted green. And then, the sky would be blue. And there would be these kind of crudely shaped clouds in the ceiling. And this is really what I kind of remember these sort of setups ending up looking like. So I think part of Sarah's disappointment, and this is a little bit of subliminal balancing that I want to do with the reader, is that Sarah is not only disappointed because she's seen this all before, but she's also a little disappointed because with her imagination and what she creates in Dreamside, this is all very unimpressive to her. So in her mind, and even in her own art journal, she creates things that are so much more impressive, really, than what she's looking at here. And showing that juxtaposition of the real world and Sarah's imaginative work in Dreamside is a huge, huge part of building her character and helping you understand more about who she is. And of course, I've got a paper chain because that's just, again, one of those things that would be like a craft that would be done with kids. You see that there's that ambient occlusion layer. See what that does? It just adds that extra shadow in the corners and just makes it a little bit more realistic. I want to edit that a bit. And then I have these the lights, the fluorescent lights, which I keep on top because I don't want them affected by the shadow layer. If I put them beneath like this, you see they darken because they're underneath the layer that's casting shadow and everything. So I want to pop them out and put them on top. And what I might do, although I think I didn't just because I was trying to be conservative with my layers, is add another layer that has a screen layer style, and I'm going to blur it. And what that will do is it will create a little glow on the lights, which makes it look like they're casting light down. And if I do decide to draw a little bit more of the ground out, which maybe I'll just do that here actually. Yeah, I didn't finish this. Turn off my shadow, and I want to make sure that I have the ground actually selected. Okay, and we are beneath. I always have to check to make sure that I'm not going to draw over something that I don't want to be drawing over. So when I do draw into this ground layer, I need to make sure. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, so see, as I add more down here, you can see it, but you can't see it up here, which makes me think that I've got some other factor going on here. I haven't worked on this page in a little bit, which is why I'm getting confused. Oh, that's actually on. Oh, okay, you can see that I actually painted some of the ground on this layer. So that's a common mistake. So I'll go ahead and erase that. Does anybody have any questions? What do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Oh, I love this guy's art. Hey, thanks, Butterfly. I appreciate that. I like it too. So that makes two of us. And if two people in this world enjoy the art that I'm making, then that's good enough for me. Paper chains. Yes, paper chains rock. I used to make paper chains for Christmas. That was a thing because I just couldn't wait until Christmas and I had to have something to pass the time. And paper chains were something simple that I could put together and just rip one out every day. Really kind of works anytime you're, getting ready for something that you just can't wait for. Tater Tot Tunes. Tater Tot Tunes is the most fun name ever. Really. I mean, there's nothing more fun to say than Tater Tot Tunes. The only name that might be more fun to say is Cumbo. Cumbo, 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 Cumbo. But Tater Tot Tunes is just a blast. I love it. Tater Tot Tunes. You're all saying it right now. Tater Tot Tunes. Come on. Anyway, Tater Tot Tunes says this is looking. Leave a lot of comments too, so I can keep saying your name. This is looking really cool. Like you were saying, I really love the attention to detail, realism here. How every item and object is placed for a purpose. Yeah. There's a lot of that in there, and there's a lot of that in every one of these illustrations. So it's quite a lot of work, and hopefully people will notice. Butterfly says, to put so much in the background of each panel when you're doing other work alone would be too time consuming for a weekly comic. It's so nice to look at though. Well, that's kind of the thing, is that, it's kind of a tough balance, right? Because if you did something that was like a weekly comic, your attention would go elsewhere, right? You might focus on things a little bit differently. Like I probably wouldn't use this kind of an art style in a weekly comics. So in this case, it really comes down to the particular project that you're working on, and then you can adjust as needed. The title does say October instead of September, and I have no idea why. Oh, I know why. Because I did that by accident, because I don't know what month it is. I wonder if I can edit it. It's January, right? All right. Let's see. Yeah, I'll adjust that. I'm going to have to adjust that on the name of the files. Hopefully I can later. We'll see. Neat. Okay, so my friend Allison, who came in from Facebook, I can see her comments on Facebook, and I can also see them in the little StreamYard thing. So I highly recommend StreamYard to anybody who wants to do streaming stuff. I'm going to move this because all I can see is this butt right here. All right, there we go. Really interesting to see how this is done. Josh Taylor says, nice seeing how to bring a story to life. This is one way of doing it. Yes, absolutely. Yes, and everybody check out Tater Tot Tunes because Tater Tot Tunes makes awesome game remixes, including a fantastic original rendition of an entire suite. This I don't know, 6 or 7 minute long piece that was based on Ukulele and the Cracklestone, which is the first published Dream Prison book, which is available for sale right now. So go buy it. Anyway, so he did just a fantastic job of that. It was a lot of fun. I should probably actually draw some things. So let me get rid of this brown color here. Dragmundus is asking what tablet I'm using. This is the iPad. And I have the iPad. I have the fancy model. It's the 12.9 last iPad Pro model, whatever it is. It doesn't have the biggest hard drive or whatever, because I just thought that was kind of a waste. Because I figured I'd be moving stuff on and off frequently enough that I didn't want to spend the money on the crazy hard drive. However, the funny thing is, it's all in context, right? It's all in perspective, because when I was learning about the iPad and I was looking into options, I remember thinking that, wow, the iPad is so cheap because I was working from Wacom devices prior to this, and they're substantially more expensive. I know why I can't pick this color. It's because I have this on a lower opacity. So I'm going to actually darken that and then just lighten it up a little bit to go where it was. All right, there we go. I'm normally not this slow. There we go. Okay, pick the color. And because this is actually underneath this flat color layer, I can go up into and not really worry about painting over the color that's adjacent to it. If I come down here, obviously you can see it, but you see how you just can't even see what I'm doing up here because it's going behind the layer. You can see where I missed a little bit of color there, where you'll see it peeking through. But it's by working with layers like this, you can simplify the process. Looks like I missed a little. I think I missed. Well, let me see here. Yeah, right here. Isn't it ridiculous, the things that I focus on? So yeah, I'm using this kind of vignette style. If you're familiar with what a vignette is, it's basically a fade to white or a fade out that's a little bit unnatural, right? So the way that the shelves just end here like this, when you look at it, at least in terms of how far I've gotten on this spread, you might think that that looks a little unfinished. But the intention is actually to bring focus where needed. And this is not only something that I think is a very beautiful effect when it's done well, but it's also something that will help me a little bit with the progress on this because I can't have this stuff take too long because I've got to move along and make sure that it's moving at a reasonable clip. Otherwise, it's going to take forever. Can anybody hear my cat? There's a cat outside the door. He's not happy because I closed the door on him and he wants to be in here. Well, he can stay out there. I'm not mean. I just don't want a cat jumping all over the tablet when I'm trying to draw. All right. When I'm coloring the line, by the way, which I referenced earlier, I'm going to select the layer with the line. I'm going to choose Alpha Lock. This Alpha Lock, what it does is it prevents me from drawing anywhere outside the boundaries of the content already in the layer. So because this black line here is on this layer, if I have Alpha Lock turned off, it's just normal, right? And I want to color this line, I have to very carefully kind of trace around the line like this, right? That'll take a long time. Plus, I'll draw outside the lines a little bit and maybe add a little bit more than I want in there. So by choosing Alpha Lock, I can lock the adjustment to what I've already drawn. And so I can very quickly go in here and change the color of the line. See how I'm just going over, I'm not being careful about it. Now, of course, I'm also spilling out into the other lines, but that's okay because I haven't colored them yet. So since I'll have to go over them anyway, I don't worry about it. And then I just go through this process of coloring all the lines a slightly darker version than what the base color is for that particular area. And I go through the whole piece like this. This is the process of coloring the line. And as far as I'm aware, there's no faster way to do this because any digital process doesn't know where I want the lines to be colored and why. It doesn't understand that. I've tried doing something where I take the base color, I duplicate it, I darken it to around where the line color would be, and then I blur it. And then I take my line layer as a selection and pull that out of the darkened color layer, which that probably sounds really confusing, but it makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense. To me, it does. But the problem with that is it just doesn't get a very good result because, again, the blurring, it doesn't definitively cut off where I want it to cut off. It's okay. It looks okay, but I'm not happy with okay. I want it to be really, really good. So like things like this, I want to define definitely that that's where the skin ends. So I don't want the color this orange color going any further than right there. So it's important to get that right. And the other thing that's tricky about this too is knowing the right value, which is the lightness of the color. So you want to make sure that you're not using colors that are too light or too dark, and that's a constant balance. Because if, for example, if I lighten the character line maybe a little bit too much, then it can disappear. And maybe the character who was very visible before is suddenly not as visible. On the other hand, sometimes I have characters that are a little too visible, and coloring the outline like this, where I'm basically lightening that high contrast line, will help pop the character a little bit more back into the background. So you can see, for example, the volunteer here looks like she's almost on another plane of existence compared to the girl, and that's because of her outlines are still black. So the black makes it so bold that it commands a lot of attention. So to kind of pull that back, I just color the lines. So yeah, this is probably the one of the less exciting aspects of, of doing this process, but it is an aspect of doing the process. And there are a couple of fun things. Like for example, I'll show you how I use different lines on the face. I go a little bit lighter and a little bit redder when I do the internal face details, for example. So like the lips and the nose. Maybe we'll put that light with the nose, but like the lips, I'll get kind of a lighter red color. And even sometimes, if it's not a contour section, you can watch my last live stream where I talk about this with the face of the dream girl. They are. It's good to kind of soften the lines that are inside the shapes because that will help clarify the contours. And it also removes the prevalence of the line, which makes the stuff feel a little bit more organic and rendered, which is a look that I'm going for Dreamside. You know, you can have kind of a more stylized approach. You can have a more rendered approach. A lot of ways of doing it. All right. Where is my incredibly good David Lynch coffee? I can't believe how good this David Lynch coffee is. Oh, man, that's good stuff. I need to get paid for this for sure. So if anybody knows David Lynch, I could really, I could use an authorization for some kind of product placement for the 7 people watching the stream. But it's really good. Coffee does tend to help a lot with this stuff. It gets me excited. Coffee for me these days is not even really about the effects of coffee so much as developing a habit. You know, a system really is what it is, where I can train myself to focus. Because I train my mind to expect certain things and that are enjoyable. And one of the things that I like a lot would be, coffee. So I think, all right, if I'm going to sit down and draw, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, right? And if I want my cup of coffee, I need to prepare to draw. So they're kind of interchangeable in that way. So there are definitely days when drawing is not something that I really want to do. And although I'm universally excited about getting books made, sometimes I'm facing a challenge with something in the story that is just, it's not being friendly to me. And I'm having a really tough time working out, how I want the problem to be fixed. And maybe I just don't really have a solution. The worst thing is when I go to bed frustrated because I couldn't work out whatever the problem was before I went to sleep. And it just ended up getting to be too late. I've had plenty of days where I would stay up very, very late at night, just constantly trying to rework a stupid problem that will not get fixed. And then I look at the clock and realize it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And I would have been better off just calling it quits earlier and trying to restart fresh the next day. And then what happens, it's funny, when I start the next day, I usually instantly solve the problem. That's happened enough times now that I don't think it's a fluke. And even though it feels like I'm perfectly alert late at night, and I don't feel like I don't feel like I've lost my ability to mentally sort through the problems that I'm facing. I guess I do have those problems. So it's good if I just accept that and then go to sleep and try again in the morning, because that does usually help me work through problems that I was having. She's got pink shoes. I gave her pink shoes. I don't know why, but I gave her pink shoes. Sometimes choices are arbitrary, but the arbitrary choices still have to be balanced and checked with everything else. Because if there's something that I put in that just like, hey, let's just give them a, like, why did I pick up, purple overalls for this girl? Well, actually, I picked purple overalls for this girl for a different reason. Is also I want to make sure that there's not too much twinning going on. Twinning being have too many elements that are too similar to other elements on the page. And so, I like a lot of variety, right? So there's color variety, there's hair variety, there's clothing variety, there's skin tone variety. There's a lot of variety because it creates visual interest. And in fact, the initial reason, although this evolved in time, but my very first thought in having Sarah and the Dream Girl have different skin tones is purely out of visual interest. It's wanting to have that sort of contrast, because when I have the two of them at the same time, they're kind of similar in terms of their setup. They look like they're similar ages. They have somewhat similar faces. They're not all that dissimilar. And so if for example, they had very similar, basically I want to change any feature that I reasonably can in order to have the characters separate a bit. And you notice this is actually one of the problems with a lot of anime design, at least that I recall, is that I used to marvel at the creativity of anime designs in clothing, because back in the day when you would God, what was it? I mean, maybe like Final Fantasy VII or so. When that came out, I remember that was sort of like the first game that had interesting characters to me, that I remember thinking they put a lot of detail into the clothing and kind of all these eccentric details. And Final Fantasy had a lot of character variety, tons of character variety in Final Fantasy, actually. That's a bad example, but sometimes when you have projects that have very sort of samey faces and samey designs, such that if you were to remove the clothing, remove the hair, and you just had the body, and you line them all up, they would look like the same character. And so when you have that kind of design where you have a lot of similarity in the features of different characters, it's important that you figure out other ways to provide variety. And so I think that's one of the reasons maybe that animes that do tend to have, and this is not a criticism of anime, by the way, but it's a different focus. There's a harmony to character design in a lot of animes that I really admire. But of course, the problem with that, and I should say the challenge that I think a lot of anime designers face, is making sure that the characters do feel distinct and unique, and that they stand out in a way that's interesting. All right. Dragmoonus asks, so the alpha lock allows you to change colors of that. I assume you mean very layer. Yes, that is the case. Yes, alpha lock, and it doesn't. I'm using the line art as an example, but that's only, um, you know, that's just a one case example. But you could do this for any layers at all. So if you wanted to lock it in, kind of like the way that I was locking in the shadow, you could do that as well. It's just that I draw the shadow on a different layer. So alpha lock does not create a selection that will work with a different layer. To do that, what you have to do is kind of what I showed you before, which is you click on the thumbnail for the layer, you go to select, and that's going to select all the material in the layer. And then when I go to draw, these dotted lines here indicate everything that's not selected, and anything that does not have the dotted line, I hope that's clear, is selected. Okay, so it's restricting what I can paint based on based on what's painted in this layer. So this layer becomes a selection. Okay, so in general, when you're making selections, there are a lot of ways of doing this. You can do this with masks as well. Procreate does have a system with masks. I just don't use masks. I think they're cumbersome, and I take a very simple approach. It's like, I know that I'm going to have to paint shadow. I'm going to have to be a little careful going around some of the edges. I'm not going to make a million different layers with lots of different, like something just with the window frames, because I don't want to have to erase the shadow, because at a certain point in time, you're wasting so much time with the setup process. And I don't want to be, I don't want to be wasting too much time doing that. Otherwise, it's going to kill my workflow. And part of that I've learned over the years, that if I work with too many layers, I am not very good at organization. I know my flaws, right? I learn them more and more every year. So as I'm working, I need to figure out the things that I do well and work around the things that I do not do well. One of the things I do not do well is I get very confused very easily when I have too much detail in a layer or in a file. So if I have too many layers and I can't find what layer I have to work on, or I'm seeing a color on the screen that I need to change, but I don't know what layer it's on, I will have a very, very confusing time trying to sort through that. And the more time that I'm spending sorting through layers, the more time I'm wasting that could be spent actually just drawing. And at a certain point in time, you realize, well, wait, why did I have all these layers to begin with? It was so that it was easy for me to edit, right? But it's not easy for me to edit because I get too confused with all these layers. So that just doesn't work for me. So it's a balancing act. You know, you don't want to combine everything to one layer. That's just that yeah, I may as well draw on paper at that point, and then I'm not taking advantage of the digital tools that allow me to do things like editing, which I do quite a lot of, and you know, even just things like I told you earlier, where I made the light switch position change based on the need to have this um, um, tissue and sanitation spot here. I made that change, and it was a pretty easy thing to do digitally because I can just select the areas of the particular layer and move them around, and it's pretty easy to make those changes. That's something that I can show you probably another time is um, how you work with programs like this, where you do have multiple layers and you need to make changes. Because when you move things, for example, you sometimes will have to move things that are on multiple layers, right? So it's like, okay, if I'm going to relocate, say I was going to take this door and say, you know what, I want the door to be moved over a little bit or something like that. I can make one selection, but then I have to pick the layers. You know, you can pick multiple layers at one time, the way that I'm doing right here. Okay. And they can deselect them the same way. But you would have to make sure that you have all the layers selected that have any content making up that door. Because if you miss any, then everything's going to move except whatever was on that layer. So, um, say for example, you have one layer that has the flat color, and you forget to pick that layer. Then everything, like the line, the shadow, any other layers that you have, except for that actual green color, is going to move. But the green color is going to stay put. So you have to make sure that you bring them all at once. And of course, you can do them one at a time, but the problem with doing that is that you have to kind of position the stuff by eye. And so you're probably not going to be able to get it in the exact same place as the other layers. But if you move them all at the same time, you'll be able to keep them in sync with each other. So they line up according to how you had them, if that makes sense. Isn't this exciting? I'm just going, just going over and coloring the line. Subtle changes, but I'm telling you, they add a lot in the end. It's all about the culmination of the effect, so that when the reader spends 5 seconds looking at the book, they're they're going to be very impressed. You know, I make these kinds of books because I want kids to open them and just lose themselves in the world of the book. The kind of losing yourself where, for those of you who have kids, for those of you who remember being kids, I can speak as a former child. That there's something really neat about seeing a kid who's discovered a book. The way their physical pose will change as they're reading a book and they get more into it. And basically, their face just disappears into the book. And like, you know, they're there because you see the book and you're like, you know, I swear there was a child there just a second ago. And but they're gone. They're now they've entered the world of this book. And you know, the kind of absorption that makes it so that you don't notice that it's gotten dark in the room that you're in and you're actually squinting trying to read. Of course, that's not so much a problem anymore because everything's on a screen now except my books. Just my books. My books are the only thing. Although you can get them on a screen. What's up, D? Looks like we got Super D joining us. Hooray indeed. Super D. Super D has a fantastic comic strip. You've got to go check it out. It's called Rosebuds. And so Super D is a comic artist. He's a writer. And he's doing incredible things at a ridiculously young age. So he's putting everyone else to shame and showing us all how it's done. So D's got such an incredibly bright future. It's obvious. When I first was chatting with D, it was we were chatting over our combined interest of comics, and I think we were talking a little bit about Toe Jam and Earl because D had done a comic strip for Toe Jam and Earl, which he's done a few more since then, and it was a lot of fun to chat and get to know. It's neat to get to know somebody who comes from a completely different world, has similar interests, but most importantly of all, both of us have realized something incredible, which is that regardless of the different circumstances, we are both totally just doing the thing that we wanted to do. uh, and we didn't wait for permission to do it either. There's nobody who's really granting us permission. So we're different worlds a little bit. Like I said, D works in more in comic strips. So he creates kind of comics like you would see in the newspaper, and you can actually see his comics in the newspaper because he's syndicated. I believe he has actually 2 strips of his have been syndicated. So take that, Jim Davis. He's got you beat. Oh man. Butterfly says, "I love the yellowy green shadows." Yes, thank you. I'm assuming that you're talking about just the general shadow color. The shadow color is a big deal because the shadow color, and this is a very simple rule that you can follow for shadow colors because sometimes it's kind of hard to know what colors you should make a particular shadow. Is try and mirror the lighting. Okay, so the color of the light, try to mirror that so that the shadow kind of balances. So if it's a warm light, use warm shadows. You can also use cool shadows to contrast. Okay, if you have if you want to create kind of a more stylized approach that's going to have more contrast between the shadows and the lighting source itself, then you could do that kind of thing. In fact, let me show you kind of what would happen with that. So I'm going to turn off the extra shadow and I'm just going to duplicate this layer because sometimes Procreate likes to crash on me. And it saves in real time, so I want to make sure I don't do something that's going to make it crash, have it crash, and then have it lock in the thing I didn't want to do. So I went up to the adjustments tool up here. It's one of the 4, the second of the 4. And down here I have hue, saturation, brightness. And in the hue tab, I can change the color like this of that particular layer. And this is one of the many reasons that you want to keep things on a separate layer. So you can see it's like when you start moving in toward green and blue in particular, or more toward gray, creates a pretty cold impression. It doesn't really fit. And I still got the shadow that's in the background there. Actually, let me do the same for that so that you can see what this would look like with cooler shadows. So you can see the whole thing just gets cold when you look at it. It's like a lot more. It's kind of sterile and miserable, and that's cool. It's just that it's not what I'm going for. In this case, the hospital. I know it's kind of a cliche idea that you have the hospital be this cold, sterile environment, but that's not really what Dreamside is about. And the hospital is actually quite comfortable. And it's kind of important to show that. So I want to make sure that it doesn't feel like it's an uncomfortable place. And I also don't really think that hospitals, like a modern children's hospital like this is supposed to be, would be very likely to have that sort of cold, sterile environment. It just doesn't seem realistic to me. And as I've probably conveyed to you, realism is really, really important to me. I want to make sure that things feel right, and they feel believable. They can be eccentric, something that's exaggerated and unusual. Of course, you want to make sure you have some eccentricities in the stuff that you're doing because it makes it more interesting. I don't think I did this chair here yet, so I'm not going to worry about going over the chair. This is an easy case where you can see how the color of the line really benefits because, she's wearing like this almost like, I guess it's like a sweatsuit that's pink. And so when I color the line, you can see it really takes away some of that cartoon sterileness and replaces it with a bit more of an organic look. Dion says, Actually, Jim Davis also had 2 syndicated strips. What? U.S. Acres. Oh, right. The one with the barnyard scenes. Yes, U.S. Acres was his second one. He also did a Mr. Potato Head comic too. Did not know about the Mr. Potato Head comic. That's pretty neat, but I didn't know about that. And look, you actually have a little logo here. Neat. All right. How are we doing? Are we still streaming on? Everything's still working? Where are we? Everything's still working. Neat. This is a cool system. I think I'm going to keep using this. And that's good because I already paid for it. All right. So this is something we have to be careful here, right? So I'm kind of assigning the same value of line, but because this character's skin color is darker, I need to make sure that I go dark enough with a line that you don't lose the skin color. This is an example. See, like if I go a little bit too light, probably a little lighter than that, but if I go, say, like around here, you see what ends up happening is where it has to juxtapose where there's a color separation like this with the darker hair, you're losing that totally, and it just looks bizarre. So you got to make sure that you're working with colors that are dark enough as needed, so that you're not losing the contrast where you need it to be. Because in a flash, especially if you're zooming in like this, you can end up in a situation where you're gonna not even notice that you're ruining your contrast until you zoom back out again. And at that point, it's you will have done a bunch of work that you realize, this is kind of actually hurt the appearance of the readability of the piece. So I need to, even if it looks good, it's like sometimes if readability gets hurt, it's not worth it. And being a professional artist is knowing when you sometimes have to sacrifice things that are you like for one reason, but they just don't work for another reason. There are many times that I've had to give up on things that are just great, things that I really love, but I've had to give up on them because they just don't work for one reason or another with something else. And actually, I've lost some things that I've spent a lot of time on too. It's a very painful cut. It was like, oh, this is something that I spent a month on, and now it's just gone. And no one's ever going to know that it existed unless I did a making of book, which, by the way, is something that I'm thinking about doing for future campaigns. An actual making of book. But I was thinking to start with Dreamside, I might do sort of a making of section in the book, because I enjoy that when books have that. But at the same time, I don't know if I'm crazy about the idea of every book having that kind of permanently in there. If I'm trying to make kind of like a classic book that will be, you ever have a concern about something and then as you say it out loud, it sounds really stupid? I think I'm about to walk right into one of those situations because I was about to say that there's something about the kind of the making of procedural elements that you kind of want to have them hidden behind the curtain. And if I put them in the book itself, they'll just always be there. It's almost like you wouldn't want to interrupt a movie, and have the director come out and be like, all right, now let me show you how we constructed the scene, and be like, well, wait, hang on, let me just watch the movie. I mean, I know that there are director's commentaries and all that, but I think in this case, I don't know. But anyway, it seems silly to me. I think that would be something kind of cool. What do you think? Would you like to see making of material in the book? Because Dreamside is, as of right now, book 1 is planned to be 96 pages. We'll see what the other ones are going to be, but they'll probably be just about, all of them will probably be a similar length. Because, I want them to feel episodic and, something that when you sit them on your shelf, they all kind of look like they fit together. But what I might do is, maybe add some making of content in addition to that. Dreamside's art is so time consuming that it takes so long to make. And even though I've been going through this process of simplifying, it's still like there's no way to make it quick. Like I can make it quicker, by using a faster process, but it's not quick. So I have to cut down on the amount of content that's in each book, or there might be like 2 years between books, and nobody wants that. So I think that the best that I can probably do is an annual release. So we can plan on having one of these come out every year. Probably aim toward having a fall Kickstarter for them, which I like just sort of using Kickstarter as a sort of a pre-order system, and then get the book out to you hopefully by first quarter of the following year. I would say maybe faster than that. Dreamside book one is pretty far along. So the good news is, unlike ukulele, I can't make any promises with this because I know how many things can go wrong now that I have no control over, by the way. But even things that I do have control over, like the complexity of the art itself, was underestimated for Yuka. So I think I added maybe about 2.5 months of creative work on ukulele, maybe three total months extra is what I took, and then the printing process, which was scheduled to take 6 weeks, actually took 6 months. So that was something that was unfortunately out of my hands. It was also affected by the virus, and there was a pretty dramatic cut down in the amount of people working at the manufacturing facility, which is in Tennessee. So yeah, we just couldn't get things out too quickly. So never like to overpromise, but I do think that Dreamside should be able to deliver more quickly than Yuka. So it's not going to be like that year and a half waiting period that you had. I would say worst case is probably 6 months, because I think by the time I get through the Kickstarter, and just given how much time it's taken me so far to edit the art, I think I probably have about another 2 months maximum following the Kickstarter on creative work, and then depending on where I print, it could take anywhere from 1 month to 3 months to print. And once it prints, especially if I print, say for example, if I print in Tennessee again, the shipping is very, very quick from there, because the shipping facility is also in Tennessee. So it takes them like a day to get the stuff shipped over, and then they can do essentially same day fulfillment once they get the stuff, which is kind of cool about my store right now. I'm using the same shipper, and we've set up a system that's been working for people where we have same day fulfillment. I think pretty much if you get an order in by 3:50 or so, 3:30 maybe, then your order should go out the same day. And I had at least 3 people comment on how fast the order receipt was. So having people compliment the speed at which they're getting their things is a nice change of pace for me. Yes, this is it. It probably seems like I'm doing nothing, but it is doing things. I promise. Stuff's happening. One of the pitfalls of digital art you really have to be careful with is sometimes things that you can see on the computer screen, especially when you zoom in, really aren't all that noticeable once it gets to print. So it's very easy, speaking of spending time on things that you probably won't notice, it's very easy to focus a little bit too hard on things that will not really be that important to the reader. And even if they would notice, that's the other thing too. You have to also realize that some things people just don't care about. So there will be things that I care about that other people don't care about. I have a very, very hard time with that personally, because I have a bit of a perfectionist look into this stuff where it bothers me enough that I can't really let it go if something's not working, even if I'm thoroughly aware. Like if I ran a poll and people just told me flat out, we don't care. I really could not shake the need to fix the problem. And if I didn't fix it, it would just bother me for a long time. And the problem there is, if I'm bothered by something like that, I don't feel as good about what I'm drawing until I fix that problem. And if I don't feel as good about what I'm drawing, I don't draw as well. So it's kind of a weird thing that I've learned over the years. This is the craziness of artists. In case you didn't know, artists are really nuts. We have this problem where you can have these kinds of irrational issues that are not understandable. It just doesn't make sense. It's like people are telling you they don't care about the detail that you're spending all this time on. But if I don't fix it, I won't feel very good about what else I'm doing, and I won't do a very good job in other things that will be noticeable to the reader. Even if they don't outwardly express it, it's just, sometimes you look at a piece of art and you're just not impressed. It doesn't mean that you can sit down and, write a research paper on why it's not impressive to you, but you just know that it's not for you. And that's all you have to know, because my job is to make things that make you happy and make you feel good, or things that make you think a little bit, not in a pretentious way, hopefully. But I want to inspire. I want to tell stories that give a sense of meaning, and they explore important moral themes and things like that. That's very important. No matter how silly the story is, it's got to have something in there that's based on those sort of universal truths. And if I can't do that, then it's not going to be a relatable story, no matter how hard I try. And that's fine too. I can make stories that are just weird. There are plenty of projects, movies, books, everything that I've read and seen that are just weird and don't seem to really have a super clear point to them. But I enjoy them all the same. So there's room for everything. But in the case of what I'm trying to make, I have a pretty specific objective. And I know what's important to me as a storyteller. Likewise, I know what's important to me as an artist. And Butterfly says, you think people appreciate the details more than I think. Well, let's hope that's true, because I'm stuck working on them anyway. So if I know that people will like them, then that's good. Does anyone realize that I'm listening to music? Is it super quiet? I don't know if people like the idea of me putting on music while I'm working. I just always do. I always have something on in the background. I switch back and forth between music and people talking. I like putting on lawn stuff, actually kind of like what I'm making right now, which is one of the reasons I'm making this, because it's been entertaining for me and has helped me when I'm trying to focus. I just like to put things on in the background, because it kind of just keeps me going. And it's neat to just sort of have this little hangout, but it's not really hanging out with people, but we are hanging out together in a way. And sometimes when you're stuck on a task that you need to focus on, it's more enjoyable to do it if you're in an environment that will let you do it without getting too much distraction, but you still get to kind of enjoy being around other people. Oh, I forgot my paper chain here. So yeah, this is the case where I'm just going to go over this with the red, just picking one of the colors and going over very rough, because it doesn't matter, because I'm going to have to go over the other colors a little bit more carefully anyway. So then as I do the other colors, see how I'm always zooming in and zooming out? That gives me a lot of control, because if you're zoomed too far out, it's kind of hard to get the precision control that I need. Because I'm zoomed too far out. I can't really get control over the small area that I need. And it's not quite how it is with traditional art, because there's always a little bit of a disconnect between where the tip of the stylus or pencil is digitally and where the mark actually is made. So that's one of the negatives of digital art that will, I think, improve over time, because like the pencil, for example, is incredibly accurate. The Wacom stylus works a little differently. I wouldn't say it's worse, it's just different. And in some ways, I'd say it's better. But the accuracy of the tip, like where the tip actually touches on the screen, is not actually that accurate, because for the Wacom stylus, if you've ever used one of those, they use this different type of technology that can register the position of the pen before it touches the canvas. So you actually can hover with the pen and you can see the cursor, kind of like you would with a mouse. You can see the cursor before you click. Well, in the same way with the pen, you can hover the Wacom stylus over, which is really useful because you can see exactly where the mark is going to get made by the shape of the brush cursor, depending on the software you're using. But one of the pitfalls of the pencil is that you can't see its position until it touches the canvas. So you're kind of stuck just testing the size and positioning of things and then undoing if it's the wrong size and shape, wrong position. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You don't hear any music. Okay, well, I guess I could turn it up a little bit. All right, I'll put on this Zelda and chill music, and then we'll see if I get yelled at with a copyright strike. All right, let me know if this gets too loud, because I can't tell. But who doesn't like Zelda music? Come on. Right, but if it does bother you because you're listening to your own music, let me know, because I really have no idea what people want in that regard. Dion, music helps bring good energy. It does. It does. When this is so true. When you're working on something and you're feeling motivated, and D, I know you've had this experience. Maybe you're kind of lukewarm on something you're working on, but then when it starts to kind of cook a little bit and things are moving, you're a little bit on fire. If you put music on at that time and it's the right music with the right vibe, that's when you just kind of take off. So it's really, really powerful. It's powerful to use music, which is an extremely motivating tool. And there's a reason that I love it. I forgot to put shadow on her hair. This is just one of these pigtails I forgot to put shadow on. This is a kind of thing that I miss all the time. I will avoid singing along with the music because you hear my voice but not the music. That would be terrible. All right. And I think I will just kind of do a little noodling with the shading work here. Shading is really the best way to describe the form of things. This kid has sort of a bunch, he's sort of bunching up his hair here. And to get that description is important, to make sure that it's showing that process that, because like if his hands are kind of, see how his hand is stuck in his hair there? So maybe I want to create a little bit more of a bunching here that doesn't quite match the rest of his hair because it just sort of sits down a little bit there. But you see how that just adds a little bit? It just adds that little extra touch of realism because you're thinking about how that would really be. It poses stuff out. Now, a lot of this is coming from my work as an animator. I was trained as an animator, and that was actually my first series of jobs were all animation jobs. So I still think like an animator, which is to think about what I often used to call the before and after. The before and after refers to the time before the pose that you're drawing and the time afterwards. You want to be aware of both states. Okay. Like what was he doing before he put his hand up? Was it he starts to get a little bored and then maybe he's got a headache and so he wants to keep drawing kind of, but he kind of is getting tired and so he puts his hand up, right? And that's the before, right? So the before leads him into this pose. So now if I know what the before is, I can act it out. I act out the pose. I literally act it out. And I do this with myself where I kind of pretend that I'm him, and I'll make the pose and then I'll study what I'm doing. Because if I can make it similar to what I would naturally do, then it will feel realistic and believable. Butterfly says, I don't know if this is a silly question, but how do you get so many colors to balance like that? Is it just something you intuitively do from experience? Yes, I would say that that is kind of something that's intuitive over time. This one is actually kind of a challenge because there are a large variety of colors, and this is actually a really challenging piece because um, it's there are two approaches that you can have with choosing colors overall, right? There's making it appealing and making it realistic, right? And by realistic, I don't mean using realistic shading in that. I mean thinking about the setup in a playroom. In the real world, things are not set up for cinematic perfection. You know, you would not have a realistically things would not be positioned in a way to look aesthetically pleasing for a camera unless they were posed out. And if you think about it, how much work has to go into posing things out to make sure that they're aesthetically laid out. So you're constantly running a balance where you're challenged to make something that feels like it's naturally just existing that way, and then it's a lived in space, but also it's arranged aesthetically so that it's pleasing to look at. That's the thing that you really need to practice at over time. And in the case of something like this with the playroom, you notice that I'm using like the colors of these boxes. I'm not being very descriptive with like you don't see like the covers of books or anything. You just kind of see general flat colors. And I've got to detail some of this stuff back here, whatever that is. um, but there's a large variety of colors, like because they're kind of just thrown in there. Because in the real space, you know, this piece would be more aesthetic if I had maybe a singular color choice for certain layers. Like if I had all the boxes back here be one color, if they were like all this tan color and maybe a slight variation, that would actually help unify the colors a little bit. Little things like the way that these flowers are painted on the doorway, and I actually might turn these down a little bit. I'm going to merge those layers. But you see how they're a little intense actually there. I'll probably just turn that down so they look just a little faded. And actually, I'm going to do something kind of cool here. See, I'm getting ideas as you ask these questions. I'm going to use, I made this colored pencil hatch brush, which is something that I use for large blocks of shading. You can sort of see it in the texture on the ceiling here. When this prints on paper, it'll look really cool. It'll look very natural so that it resembles like a colored pencil book. But if I go into here, I can actually kind of pull out some of that color in here to indicate the way it's faded, not only because it's maybe the kind of paint that fades and it's been up here for a little while, but it's also maybe gotten a little dinged and scratched here and there. And there actually are some pretty cool brushes for just that effect. You can use like this stucco brush, so I could get little knocks in the art. Because now think about this. This is a realistic thing. What happens all the time when you approach a door is people's feet will kind of smash into it. You know, you kick the door all the time, and if it opens up, it'll probably hit things like this trash can. So areas like this would probably get a little bit of a, probably start to get kind of beat up. You see how that adds a lot of realism to it? And also it creates the impression of brush. But this is something that you have to be very careful with your style, with your particular style, because if I, and by that I mean the style that you've chosen for the piece, because if I do make kind of a realistic faded effect for these flowers, I have to make sure that that doesn't juxtapose harshly with the colored pencil look that I'm going for the rest of the project. You know what I mean? It really is something I think you just kind of get a feel for. But yeah, in terms of your question overall, I would say that it really does come down big time to just practicing. and that's going to work with everything. I mean, everything. There are always techniques. You know, somebody asks this, people ask these questions like, are there fast ways of doing things, or do you just have to practice? It's like, well, the answer is both. There are fast ways of doing things. You also have to practice, and the more you practice, the easier it will be to discover those things that will be time savers for you. So I hope that answers your question. So are people here? I mean, I know what Dee's doing, but are people here working on stuff of their own? Dee, we got to get you on to hang out. You got to jump on the session. You can chat with us. But yeah, I'd love to know what people are doing, because usually when people come to streams like this, they at least have ideas of things that they would like to do, and I'd love to know more about what it is that you're doing. This is a really groovy remix of Zelda. What is this, The Lost Woods? Dion says, "Don't mind reading." Yeah, yeah, you're right. I don't know what goes on in your brain. I don't know what goes on in your brain, and I won't pretend to know. I've got to add a little bit of color into these blocks back here. Sometimes I get in these positions with these pieces where I don't know, like, what else I can do, but I feel like there's something that's just missing. So I'm just gonna kind of pick some random colors for stuff back here. Whenever I do a new thing like this, where, for example, I'm changing something, where I'm coloring over something like this, I tend to make a new layer. Whoops, that's way too dark. What am I doing? And since I'm painting underneath the shadow layer, it's going to blend it in nicely with what's already in there. So it's not the exact same color. It doesn't appear in the final as the exact same color. If I turn off the shadows, then you'd see that it was. All right. I'm going to erase some of this shadow on the edges of these things, just to pull them out a little bit there. And once I'm happy with this is a pretty minor change, but once I'm happy with it, I'll merge it down. Oh, stuff like this. So I don't really like to have too much of the brush stroke indicated for the shadow like this. I want to get rid of that. And so I use my colored pencil hatch brush with an eraser, and I can kind of pull that out and get a little bit of a smoother. See, I'm just going to eliminate some of these strokes in here and get more of a fade. There's some places where I like having, leaving some harder edges like this. It gets kind of a watercolor effect. And I'm going to do that actually to the base color too. To get that vignette effect. I'm not liking how harsh this line looks here. I think I might actually eliminate the line internally and kind of fade out. Just eat away at this outline here until it just fades nicely. This is actually an edit of I took the line art from a previous version of this page, and because I scaled the image, previously it was a much smaller image. So I scaled it up, and that made the lines a little bit blurry. So as I go, I'm kind of refining the lines too, so that they don't look too blurry. Yeah, I was right. That's right. Butterfly. I'm drawing webcomics, but I'm a noob and not very good. There's so many areas to learn all at once, and it's overwhelming at times. That's an easy thing to deal with. All right, I've got your solution. Um, it's going to sound like the most incredibly brilliant thing you've ever heard. You ready for this? I'm going to change your life today, butterfly. Today, I helped a butterfly. All right, it goes like this: take everything one step at a time. Mind blowing. I know your mind is blown. Take everything one step at a time. But dude, take it one step at a time. Make it small. Make it something that's easy to bite off. You know, don't try to do an enormous project right off the bat, unless you really want to. And in which case, do it. Because if you want it badly enough, you'll make it work. But that's really the good news. That's the really good news. As long as you remember, here's something for you to remember: that under no circumstances should this ever leave your mind for even a moment. There should never be a moment when you question this because it's so obviously true. Anybody can see it. It's plain as day. And that is that there is zero reason that you are unable to do this. You can't give me a reason that doesn't have a solution to it. Okay, there's nothing. You could say you have no money and you have no place to live. You have 53 kids. You have no job. You could give me every single reason that you have, but there's always an answer. It might not be a fun answer, but there's always a way. There's always a next step. It's like, well, I've got all these reasons I can't do something. Okay, but then what's the end of the sentence? I've got all these problems, and I guess I need to figure out how to sort through some time and maybe take an hour every week, and maybe I need to just get set up with something stupid, just a piece of paper and a pen. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And maybe there are people who have found great success making scribbles and making them into comics. You could make a scribble comic. You could make that the thing that you're doing. There's so many ways of altering your approach, and realize that it's never about changing outwardly. It's all about changing inwardly. Everything has to change in me, because I can't change the world. I can't make the world work around me. I can't change the hours that I have to work. I can't change things at work I have no control over. If I have family obligations, I can't change those. What I can change is my approach to them. So if there's something that I want to do and it doesn't work, I have to change what I'm doing. All right, until it's doable. And then I can look at what's doable and I can say, is this worth my time? And if it's worth your time to do the thing that's doable and you want it badly enough, that's your mathematic formula. Right there. It's something that I know that I can do. I figured out the time. I know that I can. When I throw out all my excuses, like I'm lazy, I just want to watch Netflix, I'd rather play a video game. Those are all the weakness excuses. Okay, they're all weakness excuses. That's fine. I have those too. I have them on a regular basis. I have them probably every day. Every day, there's some time spent that could be, if I was a little stronger, would be spent developing more art. And next year, I'd be happier. But let me tell you something that's funny about the excuses. And here's the real kicker. This is the cold-blooded truth. Everybody understands the excuses for why we can't move forward with something that we really want to do. Everybody understands. If you tell somebody, you're like, oh, I just didn't have the energy. I get too much, there's too much that I'm trying to focus on. I'm too tired when I get home from work. I don't have any time. But here's the thing. 5 years from now, you're not going to remember any of your reasons. The only thing you're going to remember is that you didn't do the thing. You'll remember that you did it or you didn't do it. And you'll say, what were all the reasons again for why I didn't do it? I can't really remember. I remember feeling like I never had time, but I don't remember why. Because that's what happens. The mind forgets all this stuff, and all you think about is 5 years from now, you're just 5 years late getting started. So it doesn't really matter if it's good or bad, or it's exactly what you want to do. It's really better that you just start making something. and it will formulate itself over time. It's like going down a river that has all these tributaries, right? As you hit the rapids, you're gonna get pushed along in different directions. It's always fine when that happens. It's always fine when that happens, when it becomes something else. I've had that happen all the time. I had it happen yesterday. I was thinking about a story idea that I want to do in the future. It doesn't really work. I needed to make some changes. And as I was thinking about the changes, I'm thinking, these changes are, they're not the project anymore. And then I thought, well, who cares? The project is not meant to be. It'll be something else. And you know what I'll do is, in the process, I'll make it better. Because if I do something that is like, oh, I want to paint the Sistine Chapel. Well, I don't have time to paint the Sistine Chapel. And also, if I painted the Sistine Chapel, I'd be arrested. Okay. So it's like, I'm not going to paint the Sistine Chapel. Oh, what can I do? Oh, I can make art for my local coffee shop. Okay. My local coffee shop has like pictures of toilet seats that are painted in different hues. And I'm like, okay, I can make the toilet seat art and hang it up at my coffee shop. And I can be the guy that everyone looks at the art and says, oh, that's different. That's different. All right, but it's something, and it gets me moving. And then when I'm done with that, I say, you know what? Maybe my destiny is not the toilet seat art. Now that I've done the toilet seat art, I'm going to try something else. All right. But the thing is, you will have learned some things along the process. But like I said, I'm telling you, the cold-hearted truth is that the future will not care about today's excuses. It only cares about whether or not you got it done. And the only satisfaction that you feel is when you give it some sort of an attempt. Those are the things that reward you. You can find common analogies with video games. One of the reasons I love games is games are puzzles. They're yeah, well said, Dragmundus. That's absolutely true. And of course, I'm not I'm not saying you're making excuses for yourself at all. This is more general suggestions, both for myself and for everybody else. But I would say that just realize when you think about a game, right? Because a lot of people will say the 40 and under generation, pretty much all familiar with games to some degree. And the thing about games, have you ever had that experience where you were playing a game that was really, really hard and you were frustrated to the point that you wanted to toss the controller, and then you actually got through that challenging part? And later, when you think back on the game, compared to one where you kind of just played it on easy, you remember the challenge experience more. You're prouder of it. It gives you a greater sense of self-satisfaction for having done that. I mean, this seems kind of obvious and cliche, but it's really true that when you push yourself, you tend to enjoy the results you make, and the enjoyment of those results will transition you into being able to do greater results in the future. Tater Tot Toon says, this translates so much to music creation as well. I'm going through a lot of these same motions just to figure out my own projects. Really great advice. Great. Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, and if I didn't say already, and I think I did, but I'll say it again because it's worth it, is make sure you check out Tater Tot. Yay, I can say it. Tater Tot Tunes, fantastic music channel. He's got so many remixes of fantastic tunes. And I also should have mentioned that he also had an entire remix album of Ukulele in the Impossible Layer, which is the second ukulele video game that you can get as DLC. I think it's free DLC for the game, so that you can play all the levels with his remixes in it. And he did sort of like a chiptune style version of the music from the game. So that is an awesome thing. First of all, it's just so cool. That's just the kind of DLC that I want to see. Something that modifies the game and makes the overall experience change in some memorable way. And he definitely accomplished that. By the way, if you haven't played Impossible Layer, what, as Reggie Fils-Aimé would say, what's wrong with you? What are you waiting for? That game is phenomenal. I probably shouldn't say this, but but I've been meaning to brag about it for so long, and I just felt like I probably shouldn't say it. But you know what? I don't think anybody cares anymore. is I was the first person, ready for this? I was the first person outside of Platonic Games to fully beat 100% the original ukulele. And that was when there were no strategy guides. There was none of this modification of the challenging parts. And yeah, I got through it all. I think it took me maybe, I'm going to say 30 tries or so to get through the cavern in level 2, which was called, what was it called? Come on, Yuka experts, you help me out here. Well, whatever it was the one with the snowy, slippery part, and the slide at the end. I think maybe I must have tried that thing about 50 times, but I made it through. Yeah, it's because I had to get a slightly early build of the game in order to know enough about the story to develop ukulele and the Cracklestone. So I convinced Platonic to do the impossible, which was to give me a pre-release build of the game. So there might have been someone in the world who beat it before me, but I don't think that happened. So whoever manages the various Yuka wikis, all right, that needs to be the top detail. Top detail is Dave Cumbo was the first to beat ukulele 100%. And I probably beat it with a few bugs too. All right, I'm done bragging. I drew a pen over here. I don't know why, but she has a pen. A little messy with the color here. All right. Yeah, so if you go from the beginning of this video right to the end, you probably won't even see much of a difference. But there's a difference. There's a difference. Here's something kind of fun that I can add. I'm going to do a new layer, and I'm going to do a just slightly off yellow color, nearly white. Very small, and I'm going to go in and paint some highlights. Highlights, the way that I'm doing them here, are good because they add a sense of texture to things. They let you know what things are made out of. You know, if you don't have any sort of textural description, then everything kind of looks very samey, which is sort of the case with the piece right now. But if I can make like his hair look a little shiny in bits, that will help define things a bit. Hey, Dragmundus, just subscribe to Tater Tot Tunes. There, got you 1 subscriber. All right, we're even for you doing the music for ukulele. Nah, actually, I need to jump on a stream with Tater Tot Tunes soon enough because we're going to work on a special fun little project together. Kind of my end of the bargain for him taking the time to make that awesome theme song for Cracklestone. If you haven't heard it yet, go listen to it. It's really neat. Especially if you've read the book, it's designed to sort of loosely follow the structure of the story and kind of get some of the emotional beats within my crazy chameleon and bat story. And how wonderful Platonic was to work with, by the way. They really, really understand letting artists do their thing. They really understand that. Which is dangerous, of course, because as I said earlier, artists are kind of nuts. Just little areas that I can pick out some bits where light would kind of reflect in sort of a shiny way, maybe around like the fingers and knuckles. We're in the extreme high detail part of one of these spreads. Oh, another thing too would be highlights on the material, like the table. And actually, let me do that. I'm going to create what looks like a reflection from the light up here. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm just going to kind of go back and forth and do a shade, because reflection like this, it depends on the type of material. If it's very shiny, it would be almost like a mirror, right? But the table is kind of like a diffuse wood, so it's not going to be very sharp. So the process is I'll make kind of an initial glow on the table like this. I won't worry about going over any lines because we made a separate layer, so it's safe. All right, and get a little extra highlight around the bend, the corner, the edge here, where light would gather a little bit differently. All right, and then I'm going to erase everywhere. I have to kind of trace out where he is. So I'm going to pull his arm out. In other words, I'm erasing the section of the mark I just made that intersects with him so that he stays in the foreground, because obviously I don't want the color going over him, and also over this piece of paper he's got, because light is not going to reflect on a matte piece of paper like that in the same way. And I don't want any on the side of the table here because the light would not reach there. All right, let's get this paper in his hand. All right, that's probably good. And then let's do one more layer. And I'm going to put kind of like a bright, harsher line. So it kind of gathers a little bit more, kind of right under the middle of the light. Same deal as before, erase where he is. All right, then I'll merge them, and then I'm going to change this layer style. Whoops. Probably an overlay. Because when the light hits the table, it's going to mix with the color of the wood. All right. So you don't want it to be too white, because the color would mix with the brown tan of the wood, and you would get a little bit more of a more subtle color. Although I might just, for fun here, pull out a brighter edge, kind of like I did on this side. You see how that starts to give the table a bit of a shinier look? Yeah, so we can do the same thing with the chair. Here's a cool thing too. The corner of the chair would actually potentially get a pretty bright mark there. And then the top of the chair would receive a bright spot too. And I'm going to create a little lip of what kind of looks like it's the far side of the chair. And maybe I'll just get a little bit on this side of the table too, just to get that gradient in there. I love getting these kind of realistic lighting effects rendered in. I didn't even realize that I flipped that, but I do that all the time. Flipping the canvas lets me see if things are a little bit off kilter. Because when you stare at something for long enough, you get used to its positioning. So if things are a little bit off, they kind of start to look okay after a while. But they're not okay. You just kind of get used to them. So flipping, it instantly shows all the weirdest parts, because when you flip something, it's showing you the opposite of what you're looking at. So if something is, say for example, is too skewed to the left, if you flip it, it'll now be all the, equally more, it'll be skewed to the right to the same proportion. And since it changes so drastically like that, from being skewed too much to the left to skewed too much to the right, when you flip it, you can instantly find all your major problems. I'm giving his skin tone a little bit of a glow. Eyelids tend to be good places for highlights. Just don't go crazy because it'll make the character look like they're wearing makeup. And depending on the character, that might or might not be what you're going for. Little points of intersection on the skin, like where this brow might meet his forehead, is a great place to put a little bit of highlight there. I keep this subtle. I make the mark and then I paint some of it out. Yeah, I'm not liking that. Right here, this is a great spot right here. First of all, it's an area on the face that tends to reflect light pretty intensely. It's basically skin oil that does that. You're getting a reflection of the light on skin oil, which is nasty, but that's life. Lips are another area that always get over highlight on characters. If you're doing something that's very cartoony, then intense highlights on lips work really well. But if you're going for a more realistic look, they can tend to make the character look like they're wearing lip gloss in no time. So again, it might be the effect you're going for, but if it's not, it'll communicate sort of a strange appearance for the character. Because remember, with cartoons and stuff that is line art based, you don't have like everything is weighed a little bit more, right? It's like you don't have all of that realistic detail that a real face has to kind of balance with some of the makeup choices that people might make. So it's almost like it just draws so much attention to it if you do put things on there that will create the appearance of having makeup. So subtlety is the name of the game for something like this. And depending on the character, I might go a little more overboard with it. The Dream Girl gets a bit more of a made-up look because she's a bit more whimsical and fantastical. And she also is made up of quite a few different colors. So her design requires a bit more playfulness in the that sort of texturing and facial detail. Actually, here, while I've got him, I don't think I added any facial toning on him. Oh, I did. Well, he could use a bit more. Make a new layer, and I'm going to do a little bit of reddening on the cheeks and under the eye. Another thing, again, be careful. Otherwise, you make him look like he's wearing blush. We're getting just a little hint of red in various parts of the face. I can't. Am I talking right in the mic? Let me know if I'm too quiet or too loud. Where the underside of the brow like this is a place where color is really going to gather because it's going to reflect. Color kind of bounces back and forth. Like as light hits the cheek, it bounces up. So it hits the cheek, and then it bounces up and hits the underside of the brow. And as light bounces, it carries with it the color of the part of the body it just hit. I don't like the cold nose. That's not an effect that I like. It's cool for certain projects, but it tends to make the characters look like they have a cold, um, and just not what I'm going for. It is realistic. You know, people do usually get a little bit of reddening on their nose. Yeah, a little tiny bit is okay. I just don't like it when it goes too far. Not for this. This Zelda album is so groovy. I'm putting a little bit more red around the shirt because, you know, this bright red shirt. One thing I remember about these bright red shirts is that I did not at that time have particularly tan skin, so it's pretty pasty, and the red of the shirt just like made like a red glow on the underside of my chin, which I found really embarrassing. Which is, of course, hilarious to me now, and so I think it's funny to put it into the character designs. I'm going to give his pants a little bit more of a weathered look here. So pick out certain areas. You know, jeans kind of get that where they form wrinkles in certain areas, and then where the wrinkles are, they get a little faded because the area that's wrinkled will kind of protrude a little bit. And if it protrudes, it means that more stuff is going to intersect with it and rub against it. So if it rubs against it a lot over a long period of time, it starts to fade and you get like a faded fabric. Or now you can just go pay an extra $100 and get your pants to come that way. Whichever works. Who else has questions? What do we got? I don't even have to switch to different platforms to see comments that people are leaving. That's really awesome. Hey, Christina. Christina Lynn, editor extraordinaire, is here. What's up, Christina? Give me some details. What's going on? What are you working on these days? You can't talk about anything you're working on, I bet. But you can tell me. You tell me privately. Give me all the details. Christina Lynn is an editor, amongst other things, for comics and books. And she does a very good job, too, from what I've read. So good job, Christina. You help everybody sound smart. I'm doing the same to his shirt. Because this happens with these shirts. You know, you put them in the wash, and after a while, it's like, yeah, they're just not quite as colorful anymore, are they? That red kind of becomes an off pink. And this relates to the what I was talking about before with one of the key differences between the real world and Dreamside, is that, you know, this adds that kind of contrast that Dreamside doesn't really have. You know, in Dreamside, things don't really weather the same way. It doesn't really have that kind of environment. It's not designed to feel like an evolving world. It's a very situational world based on what Sarah is thinking at that point in time. See, Christine is not saying anything now because she can't talk about whatever she's working on. Just assume that it's something cool. Oh, I didn't know that was public. All right. Nice. Like I said, she works on some cool stuff, huh? Cool stuff. Sorry, give me 1 second here. Yes, Kingdom Hearts 3 manga. Um, I wonder what that's like. What is it like to proofread? So do you do translation as well, Christina, or uh, do you receive things in English that then need to be checked up on? I'm very curious about your process for that. Well, it looks like Dragmundus is a fan, so you better do a good job, Christina, because now he knows. From a distance, when you do these kinds of highlights too, I mean, you zoom in, you kind of do them in a high degree of detail. Um, when you zoom out, it really becomes something. Everybody ready for fall? It's coming. Sometimes if you get too detailed with this stuff and you zoom out, you might realize that it's actually too detailed. It's like unrealistically detailed, and you kind of have to pull some of it out because it doesn't match the surroundings. So you can either make the surroundings as detailed as the thing that you're doing, or you can pull back on the detail a little bit. But usually with highlights like this, I'm okay. Stream keeps glitching on your phone. Shoot. Um, you're on YouTube, it looks like. Hey, this even tells me what you're viewing on. That's neat. Yeah, it looks like it's okay over here. Yeah, give it a refresh. You're not at the top of some mountain somewhere, are you? Or in the middle of the woods? Christina, you should join me for a stream sometime. You can talk about your process. Although you probably do that quite a lot. And I have no idea if you heard that. If the stream is glitching out for you. But it'd be nice to get some voices other than mine. So you proofread the English text after it's been translated and adapted. I wish you knew Japanese, but it sounds hard. Yeah, I think it's a tricky language to learn if you're coming from English. That's what I'm told. Yeah, Christina, you're welcome to jump in if you want. I can send you a link if you want to jump in the stream. It's very easy using this StreamYard tool. I think I clicked this invite button. Where's Christina? There she is. I would start cheering Christina's name until she jumps in the stream, but it would only be me. So this toy bus here would be either like a plastic or a wood, right? So I actually do a bit of a brighter highlight on it. And this mat also would be plastic. And the plastic is going to reflect light very differently. And also, you know, mats like this, I mean, I guess it could have been like a rug or something, but I was thinking that this is more of like a mat. I have it curl up at the edge here. You know, the implication is that it would probably have been folded, you know, folded into like squares to make it easier to store. And wherever there would be crease lines, you would get like a little bit of a light reflection. Just going to trace around the character shadow, because obviously the shadow would not allow light to reflect. All right, Christina says her internet's being wacky, so another day. But yeah, that would be good. That would be fun. Butterfly says, I want to know why she chose to go into editing, and also specifically for manga. Also, what are the main problems she runs into? But we can wait for a future stream. Alrighty. Well, Christina, if you want to go ahead and comment on it, and I'll post your comment here, and or we can wait and talk about that another day. And one thing I can note is that Christina doesn't exclusively do manga, because she has worked on American comics as well, that are not, I wouldn't call them manga. So I know she does a variety of things. Yeah. See, I'm constantly drawing and fixing. So I'm thinking about these creases, kind of how the mat might look if it's been unfolded. You know, because the mat would probably be stored on the shelf here or something, and just taken out as desired. That Mario collection comes out this week, doesn't it? Anybody excited for that? I think the Zelda music's going to put me to sleep. So areas like this where I have these two lights, they're both casting light down. I kind of am just going to sort of make it up. I'm not really going to think too hard about how it should look in every circumstance because I can waste a lot of time trying to figure out the dynamics of lighting, or I can just kind of estimate where I think the light would be, and I'm not going to worry about it too much because zero people will look at it and say, I don't know, the light is 3 millimeters off from where it's supposed to be. I would like a refund on the book. Now watch somebody say that. Yeah, Christina says, I work on independent American comics too. Most famous is probably Earthworm Jim. And oh, you guys are talking about the new Mario. Yep. Yes, that's exciting. Yeah, Christina, why don't you post your Twitter handle here? A few years ago, you got halfway through Super Mario Galaxy and they got too busy with college and forgot about it. I need to play it again. Yes. College, that got in the way of my games too. Butterfly is asking about Earthworm Jim, if it's based off the Worms game. No. Like the Team 17 Worms game? No. Earthworm Jim is a video game character from the 90s. a really groovy one. That's right. Earthworm Jim had a cartoon. Keep forgetting about that. But yes, it did. It didn't run for very long. But I know that the voice of Earthworm Jim was the same voice as Homer Simpson. I thought that was funny. And you can find Christina Shadow Wings 7. That's Shadow _Wings _7 on Twitter. Hair is a time-consuming thing to draw if you do it this way. There's a lot of detail in it, and you can kind of get lost in the detail, but it really adds a lot of beauty if it's done well. It's almost like petals of a flower. You know, you want to have it's a really decorative element of a character. And you can see I'm keeping these highlights sketchy in the sense that they look like they're made with a colored pencil. You know, and that way I can keep it stylistically matching. Earthworm Jim comic is on Kickstarter now. Book 2 is coming soon. You can get a copy of book 1 too. Butterfly asks, Christina, are you more of an English background or art background? I don't know if I should be reading these out loud or not. I don't know how to do this stuff. So I'm leaving it to you to tell me if I'm doing something weird. That's your job. Your job is tell Dave when he's doing something weird. So this is an example where sometimes people can put the wrong kind of texture on things if they're too consistent. Like, let me show you what happens here. So if I go and I make too intense of a highlight on the sweatpants here, it makes them look like they're plastic. Okay, because plastic reflects light differently than fabric. Fabric diffuses the light, it spreads it out and softens it, right? So you're still going to see a highlight, but it's going to be a soft, kind of pillowy highlight. So it's easy to remember because if it's like a fabric, just remember that it's soft. And if it's a harsher sort of thing, like a like a plastic material, then it will get a sharper highlight. And remember, highlights face the eyes; they don't face the direction. So, like a highlight, if this was plastic, for example, we'd see a highlight here. We wouldn't see it in the top middle, like that. Even though the light's coming from above, what happens is the reason that we see the highlight is because light is reflecting into our eyes. Okay. So as it reflects, it pops back and hits us, and that's why it's based on our eye position and not on the relative position of the light. You'll see a lightning, right? A lightning of color that will be on the upper side because the light's coming from that direction. But the actual highlight, that sharp highlight, will be the part that's kind of the closest to us. So like if it was a round shape, you know, like a watermelon or something, right? You would have, and the light was coming from above, the highlight wouldn't be here. The highlight would be somewhere maybe around there. I think. Fact check everything I say. I learn as I go. But I think that's right. And if it's not, it's close to what I just said. And close is good enough. People don't really notice. As long as you put a lot of care and concern into stuff, I don't think people are overly concerned about that kind of thing. You know, people are concerned about quality. They want to know that something was made with care. And also, I noticed something else, and you can clarify this, I suppose, is that people tend to not care if things change between projects, so long as they change for the better. I've always kind of used that logic. Like if you have, say, you have two, like a sequel to something, and the sequel is, a different design from the original. Ooh, that doesn't work. Also, I'm on the wrong layer. When I'm going over the wood, I need to use this overlay layer. But if something is like, if there's a sequel to something and it changes, I think people are generally okay so long as it changes for the better. Of course, better can be subjective. I guess better just is subjective. Christina says she got her degree in English creative writing. I don't write or draw as much as I used to, but I'm trying to get back into just doing creative stuff for fun. It's very rewarding. Yeah. Makes you feel special? Oh, good. Okay, then I'll keep doing it. But only for you. Looks like everybody is watching on YouTube, which is interesting. I guess it makes sense. I have not been active on my Twitch channel. That's something I need to change. I know that D is active on Twitch, and D also has a very active Twitter account, and actually I think he's pretty much active on everything. So I need to be more like him. Oh, I think I'm going to make a highlight right in the floor, too. So the floor is pretty shiny. So I'm going to not be quite as diffuse as the... might not be a good idea to do this on the overlay layer. Yeah, I can't tell what you're looking at there. When you do it on with different layer styles, it has different effects that show up differently and affect the way that it plays with the other layers. So I'm just going to do a regular highlight reflection like this. And it won't be this intense. I'm going to pull back on it. The thing about the ground is, even though it's reflective, it's also kind of, it would be scuffed up. People would be walking on it a lot. And so it's not like it's super polished. So it could still end up being diffused. Like if you look at a surface that's very scratched up, that was once polished, like a shiny wooden floor or something like that, you'll find that maybe when you when it was first done, it was really reflective, almost not like a mirror, but more reflective than a panel of wood would be on its own that's not polished or has any finish on it. I don't think I'm liking this highlight. It's also going to be right in the middle of the page. So one of those things that you have to think about all the time with this stuff is, where is it in proximity to the gutter? Because you don't want characters' faces or any really important element like text to be too close to the middle, because you're going to have the book divided. Greg Munnis asks, what kind of games do you play, Dave? I play everything. I play all kinds of things. I mean, these days it's mostly about, well, not mostly. I guess I occasionally look for projects that I think would make for cool books. So that's a thought process. But at the same time, I love them. I always have. But there really is no specific style. I do really like RPGs, but I tend to go a little older school with them. Although there have been newer ones that have kind of fallen into that more old school design. I'm not a fan of games like Mass Effect. Nothing wrong with them, just not my cup of tea. I tend to like very whimsical fantasy, which you might guess. I really liked. Played the new Dragon Quest, Dragon Quest 11. That was a lot of fun. Although it's about time they add more musical variety, I think. My only negative on that. Oh, well. Everyone can see your your Twitter messages to me, because I forgot to turn off my notifications. Let's see what happens if I make my Twitter page active. Maybe if this is active, it won't do it. Try sending me another random message. We'll see if it shows up as a notification while I have Twitter active on my main computer. Isn't this fun? I'm figuring this out as I go. Huh. Well, I guess so. Okay, well, don't send me any horribly embarrassing messages. So, but it looks like I tried to join in, the screen share wouldn't work. That's weird. Did you click the link? It should let you join regardless of whether or not you screen share. But once you're in, I think you can then set it up. Of course, I really don't know what I'm talking about because I'm so new to this myself. Maybe it's, let me get another invite link. Let's see if this works. Try that, D. I really want to whistle. All right, that's it. Oh, I see somebody. I see somebody. All right, I'm going to try adding you to the stream. Hey, 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 you there? I see you. I think your mic is now muted. Oh, there's two of you.
Hello?
Hey, there you are.
Hey.
D.
Uh,
Let me turn down Zelda. I can hear you.
I... So I'm sharing my screen, but I don't know if it's working.
No,
Sorry to...
it's here. I have to add it. Let's see. Okay, add to stream. How's that?
Yes.
There we go. Hey, those guys look familiar.
They do.
Those guys look familiar. I know them.
Hold on. I want to... Oops. Share. Am I able to... Here we go.
Yeah, I've got two of you. Interesting. All right, I'm going to try removing your other one. Let's see what happens. See if I can still hear you. Are you still there? No. Okay. All right. Okay, I think I got you back.
Yeah, hold... I'm sorry for jumping in and ruining your stream.
No. This is good. You can help me work this out. Because I'm trying to figure this stuff out. So this is helpful. Come on, D. You can't ruin anything. Yeah, we can see your screen just fine. Butterfly asks, is that Clip Studio? And I believe it is Clip Studio. Christina, to answer your question, I am using Procreate. And looks like, what are you, near the end of Fire Emblem Three Houses. That's one I haven't seen yet. Love the comic, D.
Hello?
Hello?
There.
Hey.
I don't know what happened.
Oh, I'm not sure. We lost your screen share, but you're here.
Okay.
But I could hear you while you were screen sharing as well.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. There it is. All right, let's try that. Okay, there. You're back up, and I think we can hear you.
Gosh, dang it. Okay. I never used this application before, so I don't know how it works.
So you're there it is again. Let's try that again. There it is. There it is. Yeah, we can see it. We can see you moving the mouse and everything.
Cool.
That's working. You want to tell folks about what you're doing here?
Yeah. Well, for one, I guess I should properly introduce myself. I'm D, or known as Super D professionally. I do newspaper comics, comic books, animations, and I teach workshops and do public speaking, for schools, universities, libraries, things of the sorts. What you're seeing in front of you is I've been working with the wonderful people at Toe Jim and Earl to produce official comic strips. So this is one that's going to be releasing this week, this Friday actually. And so they gave me permission to actually share that I can actually work on these, live streams. So I was like, hey, kind of, we'll try it out.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I saw that last one. Toe Jam and Earl are such great characters. A lot of fun to work with.
Yeah, it's been really fun working on these. It's a huge honor that they give me the chance to do it.
Hmm. And I know that you and I talked a little bit about this, but why don't you tell people what was the genesis of working on the comic strip?
Uh, in terms of
Just what was the initial thing that made you think I want to make a Toe Jam and Earl comic strip?
oh, so like sometime last year they started producing some comics, but then they kind of just stopped, and I thought they were really fun to do. I mean, I thought they were like really fun to like they looked really fun. Like Toe Jam and Earl as characters kind of really worked themselves well uh as comic strip characters,
Hmm.
and I thought it'd be fun, to kind of branch off of that. Go, hey, let's kind of you know do something with that, and I contacted them, and they were like, "Hey, yeah, this sounds fun. Let's talk with Mr. Greg about it." And Mr. Greg was completely on board with it, and so then we just started. I made a a sample comic just to kind of show them like, hey, this is what these would look like, or
Hmm.
what I had an idea of, to help give a visual example, and they loved it. So they said, yeah, let's start making some comics. So right now they're being produced weekly as just
Hmm.
something on the side. But I actually am just finishing this one. I'm about to put the final touches on this one. If I could find the things I'm looking for.
You know, Dion, while we're on the subject of comic strips, I'm something that you and I didn't get too much time to talk about in our brief chats is how you got involved with meeting people like Jim Davis, because I think that is a really cool thing. I mean, how awesome is Garfield? And there must be some pretty cool stuff behind there that I haven't heard.
Well, as I think you and I talked about, and for those that don't know me, as I've mentioned earlier, I do comic. I do newspaper comics, and Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield, was the one who gave me that career in that. Uh, because I was working on a comic series back then that I was really invested in, and he felt that it'd be something that it would be a good learning opportunity for me to have my own comic and to learn about what I want to do as a career. And he felt that if I create comics, if like for this one particular comic, he said, whether you work on it forever or you work on it short term and you focus on something else, it'll be a good learning experience for you to have. And so he helps, get my comic strip syndicated as a newspaper comic strip, which I did every day for 2.5 years. And so that's kind of where I got my start at. And this was in 2015. So I started uh, being a professional cartoonist at 19. And so, yeah, this was back in 2015. So I've been doing this. I've been doing professional cartoon work for at least 5 years, 5, 6 years.
That's awesome. That is so cool. How neat is that? I think when I was 19, I was noodling over Garfield books and kind of wishing that I could get a career in comics. So that's all the more impressive. How did you end up meeting him in the first place?
So um, I knew a friend that worked for him at the time,
Hmm.
and he knew how much of a Garfield fan I was. So he helped schedule a meeting with with Jim Davis. He told him a bit about me, told him a bit about my work, and Jim Davis was interested enough to want to have a an actual meeting with me. So they invited me to Paul's Inc., where they actually produced the Garfield comic strip, and uh, everything related to Garfield was housed there. And cool thing is, he lives like 45 minutes away from me, which was pretty convenient too. And so and
Mhm.
so he actually I was actually you know in his actual office. Like he has his own private office right next to Paul's Inc. And he invited me there and talked with me for about almost 2 hours about cartooning and Garfield and my love for Garfield. And he showed me some really cool exclusive stuff that wasn't going to be showed to anybody for at least another 4 months. And so it was, a really cool experience to have.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, obviously that was one of those uh, career making moments. So it's the kind that you don't really forget.
Yeah.
I
It,
think about times when, I at the time sometimes you don't realize how significant that kind of meeting is, and then even the times when you do realize, it's still surprising when you think back on it later. That I'm like, wow, that's really neat. This is the kind of thing that people think, well, I mean, I'd like to do that, but there's really no easy way to get a hold of these people. Or, well, I mean, what would I say if I had a meeting with somebody like that? And then, you kind of just do it. So good on you for making that happen. And obviously for impressing Jim, who I'm sure has seen many, many people approach him with similar thoughts. So obviously there's something about what you presented to him that he thought was particularly intriguing.
yeah, and and what's so baffling about that is his cartoonists have even talked to me about this, and they were like, there are some things Jim Davis has done for you that he's never done for anyone else, or rarely does. Like one of the things were like he drew me, an actual Garfield, like he drew me a picture of Garfield. Uh, and actually, let me see if I could pull up. Um, yeah, let me see if I could pull up my special Garfield shrine. Have it. Uh, Let me see if I can find it. Also, can people still see your screen too, or is it just
No,
on mine?
I've maximized your screen. I think if I add it, let me see. I think I can change this so that it has. Let me see. Let me try a couple of things here. All right, let's see. I can maximize my picture, and I can maximize your window. I can exclusively show your window. There we go. That's good. And then let me see what happens if I add me. Okay, see, it replaces you. Um, so I think we have to go back and forth between it. But that's strange because we should be able to show the screen share as mini windows. So I think I've seen people doing that before. Let me see. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'll figure it out, but for the time being, I'm gonna. Whoa, neat! Yeah, we're definitely gonna maximize that. That is
so,
very cool.
so this isn't everything, I should say,
Yeah.
but I have a special Garfield shrine in my apartment, and so there's some things that he and his staff have done for me, which really means a lot to me. For one, as I said, Jim Davis has drawn, a drawing of Garfield. Uh, he gave me he gave me the cup that I drunk out of during our meeting in his office, along with the coaster, which is shape of the Paws Inc. logo. But the two big things he's done for me was he actually drew art of my character Karami from my newspaper comic strip Life with Karami, which was the comic strip he helped get pushed into newsprint. And then he also drew over here my two characters from my other comic series, Pen and Ink. And so like stuff like this, his cartoonists have told me like it's rare. Like he doesn't do that for anybody. So it's huge, honor and blessing to me that he really has that much faith in what I'm doing to be able to, to want to do stuff like this for me. And so, and also one of his cartoonists, have drawn Penn with Garfield. They both love food, so it was funny to, see them together like this. But I think one of my most cherished cherished gifts. Uh, so I have a comic strip called Rosebuds, and it's about these three sisters, Rosa, Maria, and Marcella, and their relationships with each other. Well, Maria has a little doll of herself named Plush Maria, who's taking the internet by storm, and we declared March 14th to be Maria Day, like MAR1 in the four looks like an A. And so it's just a day where we celebrate Maria, Plush Maria, all rosebuds in general, things like that. And one of Jim Davis's cartoonists, chimed in and made a Garfield comic strip, crossover with Plush Maria. And so one of the things that Plush Maria does, like I have a spin-off comic with just her doing random things and whatever, and he was trying to emulate that random humor that the comic strips have with Plush Maria, and she Garfield eats her as the punchline.
That's great, fantastic.
And so it's a huge treasure for me. I have it framed in my apartment too. And so it's been just like this whole journey of cartooning has just been incredibly fun and full of love and passion, and seeing so many people, especially ones I've admired and looked up to, who are willing to take a chance on me and support what I'm doing. And so it really means a lot that you know there's people out there that are being so nice and supportive of me.
Absolutely, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm gonna go brag to people that I have you on. All right. Why don't you let your people know, D, so that I can get two of your viewers. D's over here with like 1 million followers.
No. uh
Aim with Super D. Super D. Clutch Maria. That is a funny thing. Where is my live stream link? Guess I closed it. Okay, I tweeted it. So no worries. One person will see it. Yeah, that is an incredible collection of Garfield. And as you said, it's not all of it, I assume.
no, it's honestly not. Like a few other things I have are like signed books. He sent me an original animation cell from Garfield and Friends. Just various things.
Various things. Yeah, you got to at some point you got to assemble the collection. I want to see all the goods. I've got Garfield. I mean, I've got Garfield was for me was kind of I had a strange guilty pleasure habit with Garfield when I was a kid. because whenever I would read Garfield, I would always get hungry, which makes sense, you know. But I would read it like before I would go to bed when I was a kid, and I we would have, you know, some of their those wide format rectangular books, the comic strip books. We'd have like, you know, however many of them just lying about, and I would grab like 3 of them, and I would go and get some late night snack and lounge in bed with Garfield. Reading
Yeah,
Garfield.
I actually got that habit from him. There was like a week of strips related to Garfield where he challenged himself to stay in bed for an entire week or something like that. And he one day he brought snacks into bed, and and John criticized him for it, but then he ended up doing the same thing, and that's kind of where that habit came from, where late night snacking happens.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh, I got to say goodbye to Christina. Good to see you, Christina. Thanks for stopping by, and let's get you on a stream in the future because I want to know more about your editing process and proofreading and all of that. That's a rarely talked about aspect of comics production, so it'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So
Have fun.
thanks for coming by. Anyway, I'm sorry, D. Ha! You got Garfield down. So it's at some point, D, would you so here this is something I'm sure you've considered. And I'm curious about your the answer to this question because um, I feel like I can kind of guess the answer, but I want to see what you have to say. Is at a certain point in time, would you want to go and work on Garfield strips?
Originally, I would say yes if the opportunity presents itself, but I'm in no rush. Like I feel like it. I would love to work on something officially Garfield related. I absolutely would love to. I technically had the opportunity. For the 40th anniversary book, Jim Davis personally included some fan art I did, and so I thought that was cool. And what was pretty fun about it was, so I have the comic series I was telling you guys, Pen and Ink. The concept of that comic series is that the two sisters, Pen and Ink, they create the comic themselves. It's supposed to be an autobiography told from their point of view, and like it's signed by their name, has their name credited as the authors, things like that. And so for the 40th anniversary book, Jim Davis played along with that idea and credited the fan art to the characters. And so,
Right, right.
but if an opportunity presented itself to work on something, I would love to. I don't think I have the art style completely down to handle the comic strip, but I'm sure if I was taught it properly,
Yeah, it
you
would
know,
you would you would you would you would pick that up if the need arose.
yeah.
But so can I tell you what I thought your answer was going to be?
What was that?
So I thought you were going to say um, that well you said exactly what I thought at first. Which was that yes, you know, you sort of used to think that, but at the same time, I feel like you have your own original ideas that you want to spend your time doing, you know, and it's kind of like a juxtaposition. It's like you love Garfield, you know, it's kind of like because I think about this sometimes with like the game books, for example. You know, sometimes there are things where I think about projects that I would love to work on, but you know, we only have so much time, and I think, well, what are my original ideas and the things that I want to contribute? You know, there's great value in that, and it's like everything that I spend time doing, I'm not spending time doing something else, and so it becomes this balancing act where it's like I want to work on the thing that I've loved since I was a kid, but at the same time I've got this new original stuff that I want to make that people seem to really like. So I kind of feel like, you know, you found yourself into a position where you're making something that is gradually over time becoming very beloved by people in the same way that Garfield was for a past generation. and so it's kind of neat. It's a weird catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things like especially if you work on something as big in a powerhouse like Garfield, you'd never have time to work on your own private things.
Right. Yeah, you know what's funny is when I got a little funny little story when I was at Insomniac, because I used to work for the game studio Insomniac. Um, there was a point in time when I said to myself, I really want to work on more. I want to get more involved in story production. I wanted to work on very meaningful story productions. I thought, well, if I'm an animator and I'm looking for a place that will actually give me a paycheck, and I'm like, well, where could that be? And I thought, well, probably the best in the industry, at least at the time, was Pixar. And what's funny is I ended up connecting with a story artist at Pixar, and I basically this is good advice for people who are trying to get jobs in the creative field is try something like this. Is I connected directly with a story artist who would be doing hiring decisions, and I said, "Hey, look, can you just tell me when my portfolio would be good enough to get a job, and then I'll apply, and that will save me a lot of time." you know. And he said sure, and we went back and forth on some emails. I gave him some story materials, and before long, it was looking very promising. Like he said, this stuff is almost there, just a couple of tweaks, and I think it would be good enough. And then I sat down one day and I thought, if I go to Pixar and I work in a story capacity, it's going to really sap my creative energy in a way that, not that I didn't have to work hard creatively at Insomniac, it's more just that Pixar is the kind of thing where they would demand the part of my energy that would take up everything that I need when I get home to work on stuff like Dreamside, which I had at the time I really wanted to make. And so I thought, well, this is kind of a weird thing. It would be a career move that would be very good, but at the same time, it would kind of move me in the opposite direction. Because it's like, what do I really want to do? Do I want to make Pixar, stories, or do I want to make my own stories? And even though it was obviously a very good move and something that just 5 years prior would have been a dream place to work, I found myself pulling out of that ambition because I really wanted to focus on making new original stuff. So that almost sounds a little bit like a situation you would find yourself in with Paws Inc. It's a great opportunity and it's something that you loved as a kid, right? Um,
Hmm.
and yet you have a great amount to offer yourself that's original that would never be made if you had maybe it would never have been made, but it certainly would have been more challenging if you had worked with them instead. So I'm glad you took the path that you're taking.
Yeah, I don't regret the path. And again, as I said, if an opportunity came up, I would not be opposed to it. I'm since Jim Davis doesn't own Garfield anymore, everything's kind of up in the air.
That's
And
right.
so figuring out what Viacom is planning to do with the guy, I'm not too thrilled what they're doing so far.
Yeah.
But that's a conversation for another time.
Yes. Yes. Right.
But it's just a matter of you know I would love the opportunity, but right now I think I kind of understood what Jim Davis was wanting to do for me. Was he wanted me to work on a name for myself instead of, I don't want to say piggybacking,
Hmm.
but wanted to help me find my own identity.
Hmm.
And so that's why I feel the way I do now. Again, if it comes up, not opposed, but I think I want to focus on the things that make me who I am. And then maybe if in the future where I feel like I have that identity, then maybe I can come in and do something special.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like doing it before,
Mm-hmm. Isn't that funny? It's so funny that the way that perspectives change over time, from things that seem so, I guess, dreamlike and things that we want to pursue. Then over time, they slowly get replaced with other ideas. Is that a Kirby?
that is Kirby. I love Kirby.
And I see that Plush Maria is wearing a prison shirt.
She most certainly is.
Excellent. And now this is the non-plush Maria that you're drawing right now.
Yes, this is the actual Maria.
It's the real deal,
Yes, the one and only.
the one and only. Yes, Dragmundus has complimented your Garfield drawing as well as saying that Maria plushie actually looks kind of cute.
Thank you.
Yeah, she also looks very mischievous.
She's an Plush Maria is described as an absolute unit. She does whatever she wants, and no one can tell her, no one can say or do otherwise.
Right, right. Now, does Plush Maria in the comics, does she talk or is she silent?
She is silent.
Okay, so she just kind of appears randomly and
Yes.
and
So
causes.
what? So there's like two different aspects to her. Like so, as I said, she is a part of the Rosebuds newspaper comic,
Mm-hmm.
but she also has her own spin-off web comic that's just about her and her ragtag clan of friends, things like that. Uh, where she's much more active in, but but in Rosebuds, where she originates from, she's like a emotional support friend doll to Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of has something for her that's all hers, things like that. Like she hasn't been officially revealed in the comic yet, but it's like her presence has is here. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. And how much of that D is driven by the internet kind of choosing the direction for you?
None. Like
That's just the direction that you naturally think is right to go.
yeah, like I'm doing all this because I have fun with it. Like Plush Maria, the big reason why the Plush Maria comics exist in the first place was because I wanted to be able to um have something while I was working on Rosebuds behind the scenes because I couldn't reveal it to anybody yet until I was ready to announce it, and then by that point it got syndicated. So I was like, oh well, all right, here's this comic, but with Plush Maria's comics, it was supposed to kind of give a break, or at least break all the silence from the comics, the stuff I was working on behind the scenes that I
Hmm.
couldn't share yet. So it was like something to keep things active and allow something to exist while I was working.
I see. I see. By the way, folks, let me know if we're getting an echo at all on this because I want to make sure that there's not a vocal echo because I can put on headphones if need be. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's pretty much it.
Well, it's a very creative world. It's neat because as I told you before, one of the things I love about what you're doing is that it's so different from what I'm doing. It's neat to be able to have this sort of alternate perspective on what comics are in terms of what you're developing and what I'm developing. Because with Dreamside, one of the things that's kind of interesting about it is I kind of fought for a while to define exactly what it is stylistically because it's not clearly a comic and it's not clearly an illustrated book. It's kind of a hybrid. And so that's kind of an interesting challenge. And then with Yuka, it was also a bit of a strange project in that it used very distinct layout choices that kind of break some comic conventions. So I find myself wanting to play with the conventions a little bit with comics, and it's interesting because I think it has just worked for the particular projects that I'm developing. It's not something I'm not like breaking conventions to break conventions, but it's just something that's kind of interesting as you start playing with the medium a little bit. So it's very cool because one thing I have very little experience in is comic strips, and that's sort of the challenge that comes with comic strips. Is one that I just never really realized. The other day, I kind of sat down and thought a little bit about it, and I thought it's interesting because in a very short period of time, you have to net present an idea, that is. It has to be communicated in very short time. You don't really have much of an opportunity to examine the world or explain. You kind of have to present an idea, get that middle panel in there, and then present a gag. And you got the 3 panel, the 4 panel. It's really interesting. So I'm curious a little bit about your mental process for writing comics, and what helps you um, think in a focused manner like that without rambling on.
For me, so the way I work on comics is more. It's less about the jokes and the gags, and more about the characters themselves. Like I focus on what makes the characters tick, what their motives are, what are things like that, stuff that feels more entwined with their. It feels like uh more like a history, if anything, like an archive of this character, or a documentary. That's probably the
Hmm.
best way.
Okay.
And so I focus more on that than I focus on the jokes themselves. I focus on what motivates characters, what motivates their energy and things like that, and then I just go along with it. Like Maria, for example, she's 16, she loves ghosts. She's not that bright, in contrast to her little sister Marcella, who's 8 years old and is in high school alongside Maria. And so Maria has these goals of, one, she wants to prove herself just as smart, or she wants to try to prove herself, just as great as her little sister Marcella. Alongside, they both have an older sister named Rosa, who's uh, the embodiments of terror. If I won't say terror, but more like she is intimidating. Like, she is incredibly short tempered. Maria may be the only one who is brave or dumb enough to actually stand up to her, or backtalk her, for that matter. And um, they each, like, for the sisters, for example, they each have kind of have their own motives, their own goals, things like that. And so I kind of work on those and go from there.
I see. I see. So, but of course, in the comic, at the end of the day, you will have some kind of a gag, or at least you have. And so, do you let the gag aspect of it formulate naturally? Does it kind of pop out as you think of interesting scenarios?
Yeah, because once I kind of know the characters or experiment with things related to them,
Hmm.
it makes it a lot easier to kind of figure out what to and what not to do with them. Um, Such as, like, one thing that I try to make sure with Maria is that, her older sister Rosa, which I'm drawing right now, she can be pretty, you know, she's really strong, and she can be pretty short tempered with her attitude. And so one of the things, I always try to make sure of with with Maria is that anything that she does, or any type of mischievous energy that she brings, or any type of instigating that she does, there is a comeuppance to it. Like, she gets what she deserves in regards uh to her actions, basically. Like, say that she's provoking Rosa, for example. She did something to deserve whatever Rose does to her, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I don't like. I won't do any like. I don't do anything that would make it feel like she didn't deserve it.
I see. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, and so in the three, are there any other characters besides the three girls?
In Rosebuds, yeah, they live with their parents.
Right.
Uh, they don't appear too often because they're always busy. But it's there's them, and then I'll be slowly introducing other characters alongside. Then Plush Murray will eventually, join the roster too. But keeping that one kind of in the background for right now.
Right. Right. All right. Now, D, I got to ask a question. Would you mind if I tried my hand at drawing Maria here?
Yeah, it'd be an honor. Let I mean,
Okay.
I can actually let me just give this to you. Um, where is it? Here you go. I'll just send it to you through Twitter.
All right. Let me see what we got here. I got to make a new document here. Just a minute. Oh, nice. You got a chart here. That'll be helpful. All right. Let me save that. All right. All right. When you're ready, let me know and I'll switch over because I wanna take a crack at the character here.
Uh, yeah, whenever you're ready.
All right. Let's see. All right. Does everyone think I can do this? This will be challenging. And she's got what does she have a flower in her headband there that has like a G?
Yes.
Now what is the G shape?
It stands for two things. So the first thing is their last name is Gonzalez.
Mm-hmm.
So the G stands for her last name, but also it stands for ghost because she loves ghosts and
Oh,
anything supernatural.
all right. Okay, I'm gonna switch over here. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, now let me see here. I'm gonna loosely go off what I think is going on in the back here. So I'm basically doing what you just did, but I want to get to know the character here. So tell me what I'm doing wrong as I'm going. But
You're asking me if you're doing anything wrong for starters.
okay, there we go. That's a good answer. All right. Probably do a little bit of a different take on her if that's okay.
Yeah, you're the artist.
All right, let's see. This is a very appealing character. I like her.
She's fun. Like she really like I don't want to I don't want to give her all the credit, but she does kind of really help mold the sisters, like the dynamic between the three together.
Mm.
Because she had like I say that Marcella, the youngest, she has the brains of the family. Rosa has the strength of the family, and Maria has the heart of the family.
Okay, all
And,
right.
and so they all three really synchronize off of each other really well. And Maria kind of she re- she really works well off of that.
I see. I see. So she's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but
No,
she is a sweetheart.
yeah, she's she is she's good. She's good of heart. She really she means well, I should say.
That makes sense. That makes sense. What are we thinking so far? Am I getting it?
Yeah.
A little bit. Let me see. She's got. Looks like this front swoop is tricky. It's a little tricky to see that in 3D.
If there was like a figure of her, I'd love to see how that would work.
Oh, it'd be great.
Cause man, I like not like I cheat when I do it in 2D.
Well, the cheating is funny because it seems like it's just part of the look is that it changes depending on
Yeah,
your.
the direction she looks.
But that's okay. That's part of the intent.
Yeah.
You know, that's very common with a lot of anime designs as well. You know that they sort of have a distinct look in different directions. Be like if you see it from below, it's not necessarily the exact 3D approximation of the character. She's it's funny that when I draw her based on your reference sheet, I didn't realize that she's got these really big ears.
Gosh, don't remind me. I've been complaining about the way I draw ears for the past week.
Well, you only have yourself to blame there, D. All right, so she's got this headband. Headband, let's see. And now, do you vary her outfit up too, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I've been doing that to challenge myself to draw different outfits instead of just the same ones over and over. And so it's been helping me for the comic strip too, because I want to be more dynamic with how they how the sisters, are presented, so that way they feel more lively than just, they feel like characters that are wearing the same things over and over again.
I see. That makes sense. How we doing so far? We're getting close.
Perfect.
It's a bit different, but let's see. Yeah, this is neat because it's fun looking at the way that you approach um, features in a way that is making me get outside my comfort zone here a little bit. You know what? One of the things I really like about this character is that the hair swoop can obstruct part of the uh, far-facing eye, which I think is a really neat look.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like her design is just so much fun. I think she may be my third favorite character design. I love all the designs I make with characters, but like if I had to pick a few that really work, I think she would probably be my third.
I see. Yeah.
And what's so special about Maria's character in particular is that one of the things that I work with in terms of her is that her character really relies on line of action. So her like she feels like more of an actress or a performer because she's just so all over the place with how her design is and how she poses and things like that. Because she, because excuse me, her line of action is just so an integral part to her character.
I see. So she's got a little bit of a Hirschfield effect. She kind of flows.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think I'm going a little nuts with her side hairs here. Are you a drawing flipper too?
I've just started learning how to flip, like maybe a few weeks ago. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys do it. Like, man.
Well, it's just you set it to a hotkey, and it's I do it all the time, and then I just think about it from the opposite direction. Because it helps me. Like I think I made her jaw go down a little too far here, and it's like I didn't notice that until I flipped it. So I can pull back on it a little bit. It's fun too that you're working with kind of this. I noticed the way that you have like the eyebrows sort of cut into the hair. That's not
Hmm.
something that I would think to do.
Well, I started doing that because how I've been drawing the hair, really kind of detects from the like. It's hard to see the eyebrows. I started doing that with pen and ink, and when I started doing that, I realized that you can get more expression if their eyebrows kind of break their face, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing that, it has literally allowed me to, be more expressive with their character designs than just, having the eyebrows just on their whatever. Like I definitely will still do it, but having it actually, it kind of actually shows you like Maria's excitement and uh, or any other character's excitement or their, how they feel.
Right. Yeah, it's very tricky to make that work. That's kind of more what I'm getting at is that you made it work here because you sort of either have to decide to draw it through so that you just kind of see the shapes behind the hair and then like the way the eye is drawn,
Hmm.
or you do what you did, which is you have this sort of inversion where the hair is black and then you let the eyebrows appear as cutouts. I think that's a really interesting take on it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really fun because again, it allows more expression to come out of the characters than if I kind of hid them, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely more expressive. Is it painful watching somebody else struggle with the characters? Like, come on.
No, it's a little flattering actually.
Oh man. See, I'm gonna task you with drawing mine soon.
Well, I was going to actually ask you if you could send one to me so I can sketch one out. Love to
Sure.
try
See, I think what we should do is we should do that on another stream. So see how I lock you in here now?
it. I was afraid of that.
I'm a salesman, D. All right. That's all right. We'll have fun.
Yeah, no, I actually kind of forced myself to, to be here because I was like, I wanted to, but I just had no energy. But then I was like, no, he invited you. Let's go, let's try him. All right, yeah, let's go.
Well, you sound perfectly energetic to me. Hit her a little on the low end here. I think I'm gonna push her pose here a little bit.
I think I won't say it's hard, but one thing about rosebuds in particular that definitely try to work on is balancing the sisters because the comic is literally about the three of them and their interactions with each other.
Yeah, they got to be
And
distinct,
it,
right?
it, hmm?
They sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say they have to be distinct, right?
Well, yeah. Well, not just that, but it's also making sure that one doesn't overshadow the other in terms like any of the others in terms of like the type of attention or things that they get.
I see.
So
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I'm gonna do this. I want to have a little fun with the color here, because the one thing that Dave can't resist is getting a little more colorful.
I love colors.
Just magic, just magic.
Hmm.
And you got one of the things I love about this. I really relish about this kind of design is that you focused on you've like honed in a design on the most appealing characteristics and limited it to them. And so it clarifies, it makes it readable, it's fun to draw. And even when you start overcomplicating it, like I'm inevitably doing here,
You're
um,
not.
then that's just the way my artist mind thinks. And it's not a bad thing. It's just how we think differently. It has negative aspects because overcomplication always makes things take longer than they need to. But it brings its own benefits and its own negatives, just like anything.
Man, I really like this sketch I did of these three. I'm trying to debate if I want to keep it as a sketch or if I want to actually like ink it out and flesh it out.
Oh, are
I,
you working on one right now? Let's switch over. Let me see what you got.
well, I was working on this sketch with all three of the sisters.
Oh I really like that Maria one in the middle in particular. That's a really that's
Yeah, and so that I'm trying to debate if I actually want to sketch it out or if I want to flesh it out or if I just want to leave it as a sketch because I'm just like, man, I
I would
like it.
I keep do both of them. Yeah, I would maintain that sketch because that's really appealing. Yeah, there's something fun that comes from the kind of whimsical approach of just you know doing it quickly and not thinking too hard about it. And then sometimes I find I'm sure you've noticed this, if I get in and I start finalizing it, sometimes it loses some of that spirit.
Yeah, all right, so I may actually just keep the sketch. I think it works, and I'll do something else. I've already did an illustration yesterday. I was pretty proud of with Maria and Marcella, which I was pretty happy about. Let me see if I can find it. Uh, uh, I did this yesterday, which I was pretty proud of.
No, nice. that
Kind of shows off. It's one of the things I've been, kind of working on. I worked on because I was like, I really wanted to, like because the comic strip, it comes out twice a week, and then in newsprint it comes out once a week. So in the mix of the two, I'm also trying to like do some illustrations that kind of flesh out their personalities a bit and go from there.
yeah, that makes sense. So you kind of do these occasional illustrations.
It is hard, like balancing doing illustrations with newspaper comics. It's kind of hard, especially because the comic strips themselves. Like I have a 5 6 month backlog of the strips, and they a lot of the strips that people are seeing now were done last year when I was first really fleshing out the sisters and their dynamics and characters with each other. So the current style you're seeing in the comic strips don't match up to the current styles that I'm working with them in now. And so it'll be a slow build up until by the time we get to that point. And so I'm working on these illustrations to kind of help balance that out until that time comes.
I see. I see. Very cool. All right, let me switch over. You can check my progress here. All right. Can't tell if she needs a little bit more on the back of the head or not. I'm going to put a little bit of color in the face here. Now you sort of do the dot eyes. So if she had an eye color, what color would her eyes be?
Her eyes would be brown.
That's kind of what I was thinking. What are we thinking so far, D?
I'm thinking you're doing amazing, and I love you.
Oh, fantastic! I love you too, D. See, that's how it's done. Let's see. I'm thinking if she was rendered out a little bit like this to give her a little bit of redness in the eyes to bring out that mischievous nature a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think let me. I want to work on this a little bit more. But actually, we're believe it or not, this stream is approaching the 4 hour mark, and I think I'm actually going to get kicked off. I,
Oh, wow.
I'm taking up so much of their server capacity that like, all right, enough. You know, you're paying me $10. It's time to get off of our server. uh, so I'll tell you what. Is there anything? Does anybody have any questions for D or for myself before we sign off? I'm sure I will certainly be doing a lot of these, and I'm sure we'll do another one with D here. And I while you type in any questions that you have, I'm going to switch over and show you kind of where I ended up with that spread as well, because I did a couple of things while D was working that I want to show you. All right, so here is okay. Here's where we pretty much ended up. It's not finished yet exactly, but it's close. There's a few things that I added that you can see added a lot of atmosphere to the structure of things. The first is you notice that I add some reflections here and there. So there's a little. See how under the door there's a little bit of green, and that green is not only a reflection, but it's also kind of color that's spilling, kind of like that bounce light effect I was talking about. You know that it congests a little bit and bounces around as the light hits. It carries that color and bounces it all over the place. So little highlights on things like the paper wheel, have some hair highlights. Put a few more highlights on the wood here and there on the chairs. Um, and this is another little homage to myself too. Is the untied shoe, because I always had one untied shoe. Might be doing this stuff, so he's got an untied shoe. Some highlights on the mat over here and on the bus and on the characters as well. Just trying to bring that stuff out a little bit. And that's pretty much what I accomplished today with that. So hope it's looking good and it's improving. Probably do a little bit more refinement work, but at this point, I think I need to move on to another spread and see how far I can get with that. And then we'll come back to it. It's one of those things, D, you probably noticed this, where you move on and you work on additional artwork, and then you come back and you learn things that you wish you had applied to some of the old stuff, and say, oh, you know what, it's I have this ability with a book before it goes to print to edit forever, so I have to be very careful with that. you
Yeah.
know
Oh, yeah. Specifically with the Rosebuds comic strip, there are things that I've been learning, like as I've been progressing. Go, oh man, doing this was like, wish I would have learned about this sooner, or or I wish I would have done this sooner. And you want to go back on them, but you can't because you're on deadline, and you just go, okay, I'll just improve it on the next one or something like that.
Right, right. Yeah, and that also is dangerous too, because not only is it something that could really blow out your schedule, but it can also be something again that people just don't really notice. You're spending a lot of time, or maybe they'll notice, but they won't care, or they might think, I kind of liked the thing you did originally. I've had that where I've spent all this time redoing something, and then someone will come by and say, "Yeah, I kind of like the old version better."
Hmm.
And that's always a painful experience. So I want to share with you all one more fun little thing that I like to do is a fun little trick that if you get into your digital art world as a way of kind of amplifying color is to make a new layer that's an overlay layer. All right, so it's set to overlay as my layer style, and just going to go on top of everything. I'm not going to keep this, but I want to just show you what it looks like. But occasionally, what I'll do is I'll use this overlay layer and paint over certain areas with essentially the same color that is underneath. And what'll happen is it kind of hyper uh, amplifies the color and kind of blows it out a little bit. So this is one technique that you can use to really push the colors of what you're working on. And kind of what it also does in a way is if you're a little rough with it, is it will kind of bleed the colors out a little bit. So things like the way that this red box is very red, right? And so it's probably going to spill out over that book there. So you see how I just kind of add a little bit of a kind of a almost glowy red color around it, and it sort of makes it pop. It makes it really glow. But things like the purple on her overalls would probably spill out onto the yellow box behind her, and likewise, the yellow box would spill out onto the overalls. So getting a little bit of this kind of bleed effect all over the place is something that really amplifies the colors. And you can see if I just turn it on and off what that's doing there. You see? And this is tricky because before you know it, you can end up getting your colors to be so intense that they won't print well. Because remember that things have to convert when they go to print. So sometimes something that looks great on the computer will not look as good once it goes to print if your colors are too intense. Anyway, so that's a little tip that I'll leave you with. And so, what do you think, D? You think you want to sign off, and anything else that you want to say?
I'm jealous of your work.
Oh, come on. Like what?
Like I'm just so enamored by your like your style, your coloring techniques. Like it just I'm staring. I'm just like, gosh, I I do like it. Your stuff is really amazing, and I'm so glad that you're able to work on this. And I hope nothing but love and success comes out of it because you deserve it, dude. You deserve it.
Oh man, that makes my day, makes my week. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. You work hard on something, you hope that people are going to enjoy it, and if they do, they do, and if they don't, you just keep pushing until they do. And the same goes back right to you. I mean, I like I said before, I'm very impressed. D is a wonderful example of somebody who just went for it and didn't wait for permission. You have there are people, of course, that help you along the way, but you at the end of the day, you're the driving factor in your own success. It really is the way it is. At a certain point in time, you're going to have to carry your own weight, and D is doing that from a young age in a way that a lot of people. I mean, younger than me, okay, in a way that a lot of people really struggle with for a long time, and that's not necessarily the fault of people either. Sometimes it just takes a long time for people to gather the belief in themselves that they can do something great. It's just a shame that oftentimes people learn that a little bit later than they probably should, and their ambition is maybe dropped out a bit. So it's great that you have figured this out, and like you said, you started cartooning at 19, which is incredible. It's like you're the equivalent of a comic rock star. You started young, and this is a passion world. It takes a lot of love and care to keep going with it, because you have to infuse it with love as you go, because people can tell immediately. It's like a stale it's like a bag of stale candy that was left out for like a year. if you don't care. It doesn't taste good. It doesn't. It doesn't. There's nothing about it that's good. But if you have that passion, and it's very potent, it's just this extremely pleasurable experience for people to enjoy it. And obviously, people have caught on to your comic work in a way that's really impressive. So see, you can't don't compliment me, D, because I'll come back twice as hard.
I would come back twice. You know, I would come back harder, but I don't have the energy. So I'll let you win this round.
We'll just leave it at that. Well, good. Well, D, let's do more of these. It's a lot of fun. Let's keep drawing each other's characters. That was a great time, and I'll challenge you to maybe you can give Sarah or the Dream Girl a sketch next time.
Yes, I would love to.
That would be fun. That would be fun. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for coming. And D, where can everyone find you? Why
You
don't you,
can.
why don't you comment, and I'll just post the comment on the thing so it'll show up.
Oh, well, yeah. I'll just go ahead and comment.
Yeah, that'd be good.
The big thing is you can find me on Twitter. Super at Super D2. It's SUPR DEE2. I want to. Hope I spelled that right. Well, yeah, at Super D2, whatever. I have a website, superd2.com. And that's where you can find the links to all my comics, Life with Karami, Pen and Ink, Rosebuds, Plush Maria, and all the other various things. But I'm most active on Twitter now. I'm still learning about the world of Twitter, but you can find me there.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you know where to find me. It's Dream Prison Press everywhere. And hey, you're on my channel right now. So what do you think of that? So thanks for coming, and we will see you next time we do a stream. So thanks again, and have a good one.